My name is Drew Ludlow. I'm the president of the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, and we're thrilled to be on now day 2 of our second annual ADTKD International Summit, which once again is virtual, and we have folks joining from all around the world. And thank you to those of you who are either up really early or up really late to join us. And yesterday we had a fantastic, primarily scientific program with researchers and collaborators from all over the world sharing the latest and greatest. And today will still be the latest and greatest, but it will be more of a patient-focused day. And to kick us off and drive this, a stranger to no one and very much a familiar face to everybody joining here is Dr. Tony Bleyer from Wake Forest in North Carolina. Tony.
Well, hi. Well, thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here with everybody, and especially I'd like to thank the team led by Drew and Katie and Richard Nelson for all their hard work for putting this together. You know, I've been studying this for a long time, and we've had meetings before for many, many years, but we've never been able to really have a meeting where we talk so much about treatment. And so we're really super excited today with the program. We're going to be talking about treatment endeavors in this area. And then we're also going to be having a talk from Aliza Thompson from the FDA about new therapies and how we can work with the FDA. As we all know, COVID has been just a real big problem, but we've been really fortunate in that our research has kept going through this COVID pandemic. So I'll be talking a little bit about COVID and how we can keep protecting ourselves from this. And then we'll have patient voices later today. So I'm really excited at the progress that's being made, at the work that our patient foundation is doing, which is really awesome. And I'd first like to introduce Peter Mundel, who is just a renowned academic nephrologist. And he was at Harvard until 2015, when he left Harvard to found Goldfinch Bio, which was a company that was formed to help develop treatments for another kidney disease, FSGS, focal and segmental glomerulosclerosis. And he is now the founding CEO of Sail Bio, and he's working with Atlas Venture to bring the compound identified by the Broad Institute as a potential therapy for this disorder to patient care. So we're really, really super excited and just so happy that we're finally getting to a point where we can talk about treatments in the future, in the near future. So Peter, thanks very much for being here today, and we look forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Tony, for this kind introduction. And Drew, thank you for having me here. Really, it's a privilege and honor, and it's part of our mission. I'm excited to be here. Let me share my screen. And if I find what yes. So, can you see my screen?
We can. Yeah, there we go.
All right. So I want to talk today really about what we're doing at Sail Bio, and then our goal is, as it says here, we want to develop precision therapies for ADTKD. And let me start out by really saying this is the first time I ever presented. We are a company. You will probably not find anything on the internet about us. And the reason is we are in stealth mode right now, right? We were founded less than a year ago with support from Atlas Venture, and we will still be in stealth mode probably until the spring of next year, but that doesn't mean we are not working on it. And so most of what I will show you today is data or concepts that you know, but the key message is we're working on a therapy, right? And so I don't need to tell you a lot about here, but in terms of what is that the disease? It's a genetically defined toxic proteinopathy, right? That's a mouthful, but the most important, it's genetically defined. So we know who are the patients who will have the disease. There are two major mutations, and you guys know that all very well. The one is UMAT, and the other one is MAC1. Those are really the biggest. And as you know, right, there were historically two kind of issues. The one is the limited ability how to test and identify. But the other more important, right, is this second point, the lack of a specific therapy. And I wanted today, my main message is we're working very, very hard with our full commitment to develop such a therapy, right? And I don't need to tell the patients about the experience that you know that, right? The problem is that this is a disease which unfortunately over time can lead to the requirement for dialysis and transplantation. And our goal is to really make these two modalities a fact of the past. As I said, right now, there is no specific treatment and an unmet medical need to really modify this disease. And that's exactly what we are working on. So here, this gives you an idea who is working on right now. And many of my colleagues have been participating yesterday and today in the seminar. We have the employees on the top. I'm leading the company as the CEO. We have various employees for the various aspects, advisors, all season. You see, you know, Anna, from whose lab this work came, and Flo Wagner from the Broad, who developed the tool compound. And then on the right side, you see our partners at Atlas Venture, right? Jean-François Formella, he's the partner at Atlas who is spearleading the investment. Very seasoned, has built many, many companies. Raj Devrashai, who is a venture partner, and Steve Robbie, those are my colleagues. This is the team right now as we are, but we're hiring more people and we really want to build a clinical team. What you see, what is not here yet, we still need to hire a chief medical officer, because next year we, in preparation for the clinical trial, but we already have a team, and all these people are working super hard on bringing a therapy to ADTKD. So what are we doing, right? So we really want to develop here precision therapy. Precision therapy also means we understand now in a good enough or well enough, I should say, the molecular cause, what causes ADTKD. We know these genetic variants, how they cause these misfolded proteins. And so now we basically want to treat these, we call them toxic proteinopathy, because what happens is these misfolded proteins accumulate in the cells. They cannot be kind of taken away. And so over time, it's not good for the cells. And what our approach is, that's kind of the drug discovery language, but that's a first-in-class oral therapy for ADTKD. Where are we right now? That's that point that probably is most important for you. We are in late stages of lead optimization, right? So we have good data both in cultured cells and in animal models that we think we have an experimental new drug that should work in both ADTKD of the MAC1 type, but also of the UMAT type. We think it should work for both. And so there was this original molecule that Anna and her colleagues described in 2019 in their Cell paper, but now we have, based on improved chemistry, we have better molecules that are more potent, and we think, we really try that, we think they have good features so we can move them forward. And that's why you see on the right side, we think there is line of sight to development and to clinical milestones. And we can discuss this later, but I think where are we right now? I don't want to promise anything because I believe in under-promising and over-delivering, but based on my previous experience in drug discovery, where we are right now, I hope that within the next 2 years, we should be able to test this new, what's called an investigational new drug, because you need to try it in a clinical trial within 2 years, and we will work as hard as we can to really push these timelines. Importantly, and this is what you guys did here as a community, there is the patient registry that will help us shaping this trial. And the other important part is, and you heard yesterday some great presentation, and we are working actively on this, is we think there's a path for biomarker development. And that's again important because you want to know when you give a drug, how do you know that the drug is working? And so you can have a biomarker, which is basically in urine, and you can measure changes before and after. So we are really working hard. We have a plan, and we're moving steadily forward. Really, I want to go not too much, but this is basically, you know that, right? But this is the foundation, the scientific foundation of the company. There were these MAC1 mutations were discovered in 2013, and then in 19, that the Cell paper came out, which showed that in the biopsies in the kidneys of patients with MKD, the MAC1 protein that is changed is no longer on the cell surface like a nice line here in the normal, but it's diffused in the cell, and the mouse model that Anna and her team created had the same phenotype. And that was important because this allows you to kind of test the compounds you're developing. And this is from that paper, right? So that was the screen that was done at the Broad, and that basically, you see, it led to the clearance of this mutant protein. You see here, it's gone. This is this compound, which was called BRD4780. That was discovered in that original screen. And now, based on additional chemistry work, we have now compounds which we're developing for the clinic, which are significantly more potent. What that means, you get the same effect at the lower concentration. And this is all IP protected, so I cannot talk about this, but rest assured that we really are happy with what we are seeing. We yesterday had a Sale Bio, one of our regular meetings with the Atlas investors, and we discussed this as a team, the progress. We are really happy. But to be clear, BRD4780 here, this is not what we will test in patients. We have better molecules, and those will go forward. And again, I'm happy to take any questions afterward. This is the principle which came from the paper, right? That this BRD compound 4780 could remove these misfolded proteins from these P cells, from the knock-in mouse kidney, and from these stem cell-derived kidney organoids, right? Organoids are these mini kidneys in a dish, and it worked in all of them. And so, and then you see here, basically, there's a dose response in these mice. Again, reduction, you see here, it's gone here. And importantly, why I'm showing you this data, because we're using the exact assays to now validate the more potent compounds that we think will end up as this drug that will be experimentally tested. So this is a modification from our review. Basically, it had been known for, and I don't want to go into too much mechanism, but it's important. If you want to develop a precision medicine, you need to be precise, and you need to be able to understand what you're targeting. So they have been known for a long time what's called ER retention, right? This is the nucleus. That's the ER, which is where proteins are basically synthesized, and then they are transported forward to the Golgi, through vesicles to the cell surface. That's in every cell. ER retention had been known. However, then through the Cell paper, what came out, there is also a new mechanism of Golgi retention. So the retention is one step further, and these compounds, first the BRD4780, and now the more potent compound, basically release these block and put it in the lysosome, which is the trash can of the cell for degradation. And so the way Golgi retention, how can you describe it? It's basically when you walk on the street and you step into tart or into a chewing gum, and now you have a harder time to lift your foot. And basically the drug basically helps you lifting your foot, or in this case, taking this protein that is retained here and basically putting it in the lysosome. That's exactly what we're pursuing as a strategy. And so here, we believe, and I cannot show you all the evidence, but we believe that on the one hand, as you know, there are these two major genetic drivers, the MAC1 gene, which causes MKD, and the UMOT mutation, which is called UKD. This is in cells, but we think that we have evidence that not only MKD should be amenable to our experimental drug, but also UMOT. And again, I cannot disclose this, but rest assured, we have very good reason to believe that both forms, major forms of ADTKD are amenable to the drug that we are developing. So where are we standing? Here we are. These are major accomplishments. So the company was really founded and incorporated only in February of 2021, so less than a year ago. It was co-founded and seeded with Atlas Ventures. It's important when you want to develop a new drug, you need a really good team, and so we hired really a core team. The people in the company are all industry veterans that have a strong record in drug discovery, so they know what they're doing. That's really important. The other point is we had to take a license from the Broad Institute that has been successfully completed, right? And so we have this legal aspect, and so we can go ahead. Importantly, we also were able, this cell-based assay, which I had referred to, where basically you can look in cells how the mutant protein is being cleared, right? Which was the basis for the discovery for the original molecule. This assay has been, as part of the licensing, has been transferred from the Broad to our company, and we were able to basically repeat exactly what the Broad had done. And this is a very important workhorse for us to test the efficacy in vitro. How good are the compounds we are developing? That's working. And we also have now established in vitro and in vivo. POC stands for proof of concept, right? So we think both in cells and in animal models, the compounds are working. And what we are really, this is where we are right now as the company. So we have several more potent compounds compared to the original one, but the question is, which of them has the best properties to go forward into clinical trials, right? Because after all, and I think Dr. Thompson can tell you much more, the goal when you go for a clinical trial, of course, as a company, you always want to have something that is working, of course. But the other point is what the FDA and the other agency in Europe and whatnot look for is that what we put into a trial is a safe drug. And so you have both. You need to make sure it's potent, so it's working, doing the job, clearing out these bad proteins. At the same time, make sure when we will test this in patients that there are no side effects that outweigh the benefits. And as I said, the other thing what we're doing here is really developing this urinary biomarker, and that's another important piece of our work. So to kind of close out my presentation so we can then go into questions, what's our goal, right? I said that we want to develop the first oral therapy. Basic oral therapy is a fancy word for saying a pill, right, that you can swallow for ADTKD. And we have really a team together that really has expertise in drug discovery and also in clinical translational expertise, right? Because once you have a drug, you need to think very careful and thoughtful how you design a clinical trial for when you go ahead and test it in patients. We have this in place and we're growing that. And my last slide here is really, how can the patient community help? I have two points for you here. The one is join the registry, right? It's great that the registry is working, but this is, I think, will be very helpful as we go forward. And then please stay tuned for future natural history study, which will come. And also please stay tuned. I said, I hope at some point in the next year, we will launch the company, and this will be then with the website. We will work very closely with you so that we can move this together. And with that, I want to thank you, and I think I can stop sharing my slides, and I'm happy to take as many questions as you want.
Well, Peter, I think I speak for everyone, and certainly the patient community here, to just say we're absolutely blown away and cannot be more excited about the progress that you've shared, the progress that has been made here. There's a few questions that are coming in here that maybe I can moderate quickly, and then we can also take some live questions as well. An anonymous attendee asked, is the company in need of capital investment? You clearly made a good sell here. Who would we talk to on a confidential basis? Can you provide an email address or something so we can contact the company? Is that any thoughts there, Peter?
So right now we are funded by what's called a seed stage, right? By Atlas Venture. And our goal is, as with Atlas, we are working on building our next kind of pitching deck. So the next fundraising deck that is completed, and our goal is after Thanksgiving to go out and raise more money. For the next step would be a Series A. And how can I say that to not sound too cocky, but I think we will be in good shape to go ahead. And I can also speak to you generally, right? Generally, that's the key word. If you want to move a company from where we are to really move forward and test the compound in the clinic and get this what's called proof of mechanism in patients, typically we probably will need another 50 to 60 ballpark million, right? Typically, and so that's what we're trying to build. We are optimistic, but if there are people who are interested in basically significantly contribute, maybe they can reach out to you and you can then contact me. That would be probably the best. But right now, I think we remain very optimistic that we will get this Series A together, especially as I showed you very little data. We have way more, but we feel very good. The overall thesis of this release, it has been confirmed. We have better molecules. We just now need to make sure that we get to molecules that are not only more potent, but more have no toxicity, right? Because if you want to take a molecule for 20 years or 10 years, whatnot, you want to make sure that the benefit is much bigger than the potential harm, ideally no harm. So the short answer is, I think we are funded, but if people want to reach out, they can go to you and then you can connect to me.
Great, thank you so much. We had another question, and I don't know, Junu Kim, I don't know if you want to ask that live. We'll see if that works. He had his hand. Here we go. I don't know, Junu, if you'd like to ask that live, or I can just moderate it. I'll go ahead and just ask it. Oh, there we go.
Hi, sorry about that, folks. Getting the microphone queued up. Just want to make sure I didn't miss this. How does the removal of the mutant protein allow the kidney to do its function better?
Could you repeat? I could barely hear. Sorry, my bad.
Let me try that again. How does the removal of the mutant protein allow the kidney to perform better?
So the question is, how does removal of the mutant protein allow the kidney to function better? I would say at this point, I did not say that it allows the kidney to function better. So you didn't miss that. What I'm thinking is, because that moving better would mean improve back to where it was before. What I think it does, it will prevent the loss of renal function. That's the first order. And I'm sure Anna or Tony would agree with me, right? That restoring lost function, I've been doing kidney research since 1987 when I was a medical school student. I've never seen restoration of function, but that's not what we're achieving. We want to, when you have a decline, we want to stop the decline. We want to slow the decline. That is our goal right now. And I don't want to promise that if you have already a partially impaired kidney function, go back to normal. I would never promise that. I don't think it's possible. Tony, Anna, I don't think so.
So I think that's a great question. So these diseases are what we would call dominant negative diseases. So there's a mutated protein that's formed in both the UMOD and the MUC1 patients. And, you know, we never find, for example, a MUC1 mutation that results in the loss of production of MUC1. And we also don't find any patients that have lost production of both alleles of MUC1 or UMOD that end up having kidney disease. So we think really that the major issue is this bad protein. And if we could get rid of this the bad protein, it's, you know, like I say, I feel like it's like plastic in the ocean, you know, and it's just accumulating, and it takes some time for it to have toxic effects. Thank goodness, right? That we don't see patients needing renal replacement therapy when they're 1 or 2. I mean, it takes, you know, a long time. So we're hoping that when we are able to remove this bad protein, that we don't have it in the cell anymore, that it will stop progression, and so that people will stop where they are. We don't think it will reverse it. Now, the other thing too is that, you know, if we just slow progression, say, we'd love to stop it, but let's just say we slow progression by 50%. That would mean people would maybe need renal replacement therapy at 80 instead of at 40. And so that would be tremendous. And there are other changes that could come. So I think removing the toxic protein is something that we all agree is like the most important thing. And in the mouse model, Anna has shown when we remove this toxic protein, the tubules look better. And so we think that's the key.
Yeah. But yeah,
can I just please emphasize that point? This is not data that has been shown or published so far, but it sounds like perhaps the question comes from someone who may understand the connection between removal of the protein and the kidney function. And so I just want to make sure that, you know, scientifically speaking, we button this up appropriately. So in data that we have not yet published, my group has shown that the removal of the toxic protein translates into improved histologic appearance of the kidneys back to baseline. So, you know, this is an important point that, you know, we think that the removal of the toxic protein, if done early enough, could actually preserve a lot of kidney function, certainly improve the histologic appearance of the kidneys. Of course, that's something that we have to also show in humans, not just in the mice. But the point is that the removal of the toxic protein is not just the hypothesis that it will improve the kidney, but it's something that we are garnering data to show in the animal models. And, you know, that's the reason why yesterday we had this eloquent discussion about not only the biomarkers that we are building in the urine or the blood, but also the histologic appearance in human kidneys, which can be done with biopsies. That's why we had the discussion about protocol biopsies yesterday, because this will be a way to connect also in patients the outcome of removing the toxic protein to the final outcome of improving the histologic appearance of the kidneys. That means preventing kidney cells from dying and causing these tubular dilations that we see in both mice as well as in patients. And so while there's always more work to do, and of course there will be work that will need to be done in patients, I think that the idea that the removal of the toxic protein will improve kidney function is something that we are getting more and more data to support. So I hope that clarifies and answers the question.
Great. Thank you so much to each of you. Let's go through a few more. We have a few more of these questions that have been put on, and then we can also do, again, some live questions. Nicole asks, from my understanding, the protein that causes the issue for MUC1 is also present in other organs. So how would this new compound be able to only focus on the removal from the kidney and not other organs?
So maybe I can turn this to Anna because she has really studied that.
Okay. So MUC1 is, in fact, that's correct. It is also present in the lung, in the gut, for example, basically in all epithelial cells, the epithelial barriers throughout the body. However, it only causes trouble in the kidney. While the drug may remove it from those other organs where it doesn't cause any trouble, this is the mutant form, right? The drug is specific to the misfolded, bad, toxic version of MUC1. It will not touch the other part. That's the normal part of MUC1. So even if it removes it from those other organs, which we know that it does in mice, that is of, that's nor good nor bad. It's just a fact that it does that.
Yeah.
But the place where we really want it to work is the kidney, and it works very well in the kidney. So, and to emphasize that we have discovered a strategy that only removes the bad form of the protein, not the good one. So that's another important piece of this puzzle.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Another question, this may be for Tony. Wendy asks, who should join the registry? Is it for anyone that has the MUC1 or UMOD gene?
Yes, so that's a great question, and I'll be presenting a little bit of information about that. So basically anyone who has a UMOD and MUC1 mutation, or anyone with inherited kidney disease, we enter into our database and into our registry. And you'll know if you're in our registry if you filled out a consent form for us. And if you're on, and then we put you on our email list for joining this great conference, and also for webinars that we have. And so that's our registry, and we collect data. We want to get as many serum creatinines from people from the past as possible so that we can study these. It's tremendously helpful. For example, if you had a transplant and you have your creatinines for the last 30 years, that helps us to understand the rate of progression for your children if they happen to have this condition. Then we also have the prospective longitudinal study, which we call our 21 study. And so this is because it started in 2021. And this study, we're getting laboratory measurements every 4 months. We're getting a serum creatinine, and we're doing a brief survey. And the way it works is it's kind of run mostly by email on the internet, so we can get higher numbers. And so patients join it, and we're asking people to join in. And then we get a biomarker. We get a blood and urine sample at the top. And then every 4 months, we ask you to get labs with us, or if you're already doing it, send us the results from your doctor. So we have 50 patients with UMOD mutations and 50 patients with MUC1 mutations in the study so far. And we'd really like to get to 200 in each group. I hope Kendrah doesn't gasp there, but yeah, we'd like to get to 200 in each group, because the more patients we have, the more we learn, and then the more the FDA and companies and everyone says, wow, these patients are really interested. And then when we start our interventional trial with Peter in the next several years, then we're ready. We have data about kidney function, rate of decline, and then boom, we give a drug and we can say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. And we also have a group of people who are interested in the study. So I'm going to present a little bit of information about that when I talk shortly. But the prospective observational study is for everybody who's affected, who is not transplanted or not on dialysis, right? So once patients are transplanted or on dialysis, they're not, we can't follow their kidney function, but we still want those people in our registry, and we still want their old creatinines before dialysis or transplant, and we still include them in everything because they provide really crucial data as well.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up question, the registry, are we already in the registry? The short answer is, if you're receiving communication from Wake Forest and you're getting back and forth, you're in the registry. Tony's then also talking about specific studies that are happening within the registry. And I think what Peter was saying is the more your family and you can be involved with Wake Forest, that's how you can best contribute to the drug development, because that is the pool from which the clinical trials and other things will pull from. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think that, so you're making a very good point. So we have our registry in our longitudinal prospective study that we're doing. And this study is independent of Peter's company. It's done at Wake Forest. All the data is confidential. All the data is just with us, with no one else. Even for this summit, we sent out an email to you guys, which you can share your information with the foundation, but we don't. We just send out an email and saying there's a summit. So we have our observational study, we have our registry, and that is between our group and you and no one else. Now, when the time comes for the interventional study, we hope to be working very closely with Peter, and that would involve a new thing where we would go ahead and ask people if they'd like to be in the interventional study, and they would get a new consent, and it would be a new agreement. But obviously, we're all working together as a big team, and we're hoping when that time comes that we'll get a big participation for that study. So right now, everything is through Wake Forest. Hopefully, very soon, we're going to start an interventional trial with Sale Bio, and that would involve a totally new consent and a totally new procedure, which we're very excited about.
Yeah, and the only thing what I want to add it is really, and it goes back to my past experience, right? And one challenge for the biotech company in the kidney space, although not many kidney-specific company drugs have ever been developed, one would think everybody is very keen to participate. Finding participants in the trial is always challenging. And so having here the registry and you guys from the foundation as natural partners, we all need to do this together, right? And we need, as Tony described, the forms and everything will be obviously done in a proper way, but it's a way to, I'm here to also raise awareness to say, hey guys, we're really working on that. And hopefully if everything goes well within 2 years from now, hopefully we have maybe less, but that's kind of the realistic time frame, we'll have something to truly test. And we want to have a way that we can reach out to the patients and the patients can reach out to us so that you can then work with your doctors as patients. Is this something I could participate? And we know how to reach the patient, right? That's why it's so important. That's what I said, be aware, watch out as we launch the company, as we become ready for a trial, that when it happens, that we have enough people who want to enroll and who, based on their clinical conditions, are eligible to enroll. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much. And what I'd say from a patient perspective to all who are listening is this means that now is the time to reach out to those family members who maybe have been more on the fringes and haven't engaged as much, or maybe these patients, and maybe it's, and again, these other folks can't say this, but we can say this, that it's time to say, hey, it's there's some really exciting developments. Have them watch the recording of this presentation certainly, and the summit more broadly, and give Wake Forest a call, because like Peter said, getting this registry up to a high enough number, because again, even within the registry, there's still, people have to be willing, they have to be eligible. I mean, there's still ways that registry gets cut down for a clinical trial. So now is absolutely the time for all of us to, in a very kind and inviting and exciting way, reach out to those who may be eligible in the future here.
And someone asked about it, are international patients allowed in the registry? And the answer is yes. So you could be in Europe and just email us and I'll show you our email. It's kidney@wakehealth.edu. Maybe Kendrah, you can type that in for everybody. if you have a question like, am I in the registry? Or, I don't know if I'm in the longitudinal study, please just send us an email and our crack team of workers will be really answering you right away. And of course, the goal is, right, we get to the big study and let's just say, Peter's doing so much to try to get everything started as soon as we can. And if Peter said, Tony, look, we're ready. It's funny because my older brother's named Peter, so it's always been Peter and Tony. But if Peter says, Tony, we're ready for the study. And then I say, oh, okay, well, let me try to find some patients, right? That's not as good as if Peter says, we're ready for the study. And I say to Kendrah, we're ready for the study. And she hits the send button to 400 people we have who have this disorder. And they could say, yeah, I'm in, or no, I'm not. And so that's why we want to get everything streamlined and everything together. And then we can also say, wow, and these are the patients we have, and this is how they're doing. This is how their kidney function is. And so that's our big plan is just to get everything together. And it's not just for the study, though that's our biggest goal, right, is to do treatment. That's what we want, just like you guys. But the other thing is we're also creating a cohort, because if there are other treatments or if there are other interventions or if there are other things we find out, like, for example, we were doing a study of maternal health, like what about pregnancy in patients with ADTKD? What about COVID? I'm going to be talking about that. So getting everybody into the registry is really helpful. And if you're from anywhere in the world, we'd love to have you in the registry.
Right. Thanks for clarifying. Another question for you, Peter, and I'll kind of combine a couple questions here. There's a question about how large your estimated market is and how your business model works if there's only a few patients.
Okay, let me answer that on a high level. I think it was in one of the early slides. The estimate right now, based on the registry, based on a recent paper in the New England Journal about CKD out of Columbia, if you pull everything together, the estimate, and I say one more time, estimated, because we don't know it precisely, numbers right now are about 70,000 MTD and 100,000 UMOD patients right now in the US. That's estimate. This obviously will change. And so I think the market this is a rare disease, right? It's not an ultra rare disease, it's a rare disease. And that's what we estimate. The way I think it, and this is all very preliminary, but I remember when I was much younger, right? When Genzyme came first out with their therapy, Fabrizyme, and so then all of a sudden you had a therapy for these patients, and now the numbers, because more people were looking, right? That's always, Tony knows that, Anna, the clinicians know that when you have no therapy, then well, the incentive to look who exactly has it is not as strong as now when you have something. Oh, let's look who of my patients really is eligible. So we have these numbers. It's a good size. It's a rare disease, and it may grow, right? But those are it's really early days. We think it is clearly enough market size to build this company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like to just add to that, before, 20 years ago, there were like 5 patients in the US who were thought to have these disorders, and there was no test, no genetic test. And then when we were able to get genetic testing for these 2 disorders, we've identified now 400 families. And so we think the number of the families is going to continue to increase. And we really haven't even, there are a lot of families in the US that we don't have, and there are also families in Europe. The other hard thing about this disease compared to other diseases is it's very bland, right? So you have small kidneys, you don't have any blood or you can have normal sized kidneys or small kidneys, no blood or protein in the urine. Kidney ultrasound looks normal. And a lot of times the doctors are like, I don't know what this is. So it's not like polycystic kidney disease where you do an ultrasound and they say, wow, the patient has polycystic kidney disease, and then they go look up Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation. for our disease, and many of you know this, you have gone to your doctors in the past and they're like, I don't know what you have. And then you don't know how to get on the internet and find it. And so just the diagnosis, just getting this diagnosis to people has resulted in a tremendous expansion. And we have to thank Anna and the Broad Institute for the free genetic testing that is done for MUC1 testing. And our colleagues in Prague, Stan Kamach, Martina Zivna, who are able to offer testing for UMOD mutations and new MUC1 mutations and RENA mutations. So it's really a big group thing, and it's just amazing how the numbers have increased over time. And I'll show you a slide on that later.
Great, thank you. Kind of moving a little bit forward to the, at least the theoretical clinical study or clinical trial. There was a question about, will patients, and as we're talking about kind of worldwide, will patients from Europe be enrolled? We have very high requests concerning data and security and regulations. And just asking, are we thinking in terms of the market? Are we thinking in terms of a worldwide market?
This is a great question. I'm not at this point able to answer it, right? Because we have not had this dialogue within the company. It's a legitimate question. I completely understand that. But at this point, we are so early. I don't want to say anything and then later have to take it back. Yeah.
Totally fine. Yeah, thanks so much. There was.
Can I just say for that too? Keep on talking. I'm sorry, but I got to say, I think there's going to be, we don't know for sure. We don't even know what the trial is going to look like. So I think the more people we get from Europe, the more people we get from Australia, all over the world, we'll see when the trial comes. And some people, we may be able to qualify. So we don't want to limit everything. As Peter was saying, we don't want to limit it right now and say, oh, there's no way people from Europe will be involved. I think we're going to be inclusive, and we'll see when the time comes. And plus, there'll be follow-up studies. There'll be initial study, hopefully many studies. And yeah, so it's not like this is just some kind of US thing that we're not going to be working with others on.
Great. While we're talking about again, theoretical or future study, let's also ask a couple of questions about placebos. Someone asked, will this be a study with a placebo arm? Will the eventual clinical trial be placebo controlled? Any thoughts there, or is it too early to address that as well?
That it's the same thing. It's a great question. It's too early, right? And we just need and maybe Dr. Thompson can later as a principal talk a little more, even answer now. But where I'm standing right now, we have not had any internal detailed dialogue how to run the trial. There are different versions, how to run a clinical trial. And again, I don't want to say we will do X or Y because it's too early. We will have dialogue internally with the KOLs. We will have cross dialogue with the FDA, which is required and very helpful and makes sense. And then we will come up with what is the right strategy. But it's just too early.
Great.
Can I just comment that patients are always partners in the design of clinical trials? So we will also be consulting with all of you for what makes the most sense, in addition to everything that Peter said. And so I think, the intent is to be as inclusive as possible. And of course, I just want to highlight that already, independent of the efforts of Sale Bio, our team at the Broad and Wake Forest and our collaborators in Cyprus and in the Czech Republic and our collaborators in Germany and Spain and other parts of the world, all of you who are here now, we have all been already working together. So we already have an international network of colleagues who work together. We have already, worked with our patients in Cyprus, and we're very grateful to our colleagues there, Greg Papagregoriou and Konstantinos Deltas, for working with us, and the amazing patient population in Cyprus who have been so invested in our efforts. And so I think this is already an international effort and will continue to be. And, of course, there are all these logistics and practicalities that are completely not nailed down at the moment. And so, of course, Peter is unable to speak because, we don't know yet what will happen. But I think that the idea is that we're going to form strong partnerships with patients, physicians, all around the world in an effort to deploy this for the benefit of patients everywhere on the planet. Asia too. We don't have a lot of insight into Asia. Tony and I talk about this sometimes. It'd be great to learn more about this from our colleagues there. So, ultimately the benefit should be for all patients with these diseases. But, there's of course the logistics of how one deploys clinical trials, and those will have to be worked out. But it's already an international team, and I think the idea is to expand it to the extent possible, and then collaborate with all parties and all stakeholders involved with Sail Bio to make this happen. So I'm very excited for what the future will hold for everyone on the planet with this disease, hopefully.
Anna, I had maybe a follow-up question for you as well. Thank you for that. There was a question as to the nature of the disease. Does it kill nephrons one by one? It was kind of a clarifying question. I'm not sure the best way to answer that.
Yeah, I can't say one by one, but we each have 1 million nephrons in each of our kidneys. The idea is that the toxic protein accumulates in the tubular epithelial cells in our kidneys. And then those cells drop out, they start to die over time. As probably all of patients are born with this mutation. So there is this process happening since birth, essentially. Slowly the drop off of these cells and the dysfunction that they cause, because these nephrons, these functional units, we have 1 million of them. So we have a lot of spare, if you will, right, in each of our kidneys. But over time, there's enough drop off that then the creatinine starts to rise. And when the creatinine rises up to a certain high point, then people will need dialysis or transplantation, right? And I'm sure that this is an experience that, many of you out there have already had, unfortunately, with either a loved one or, for yourself. And so I think the idea is that we're trying to prevent the drop off of as many nephrons as possible, preserve as many of those cells as possible. And again, as we learn more about how these treatments work, we can start perhaps to treat people earlier to preserve as much kidney function as possible, to what Peter and Tony were saying earlier. But, obviously, we have a lot of road ahead of us to study these treatments in patients so that we can understand more about how can they best be used. So fully intend to do that, and we will get there. I'm sure of it. We just have to now continue to, deliberately work toward that future. And we have to, all of us, work in partnership to make that happen. But we will learn all this information and we'll find out how to best use these treatments for all patients.
Thank you. There was one more question here, and I think maybe Tony might be the one to answer it. Could you specify the procedures with the registry for international patients outside of the US? From my understanding, the nephrologist will enter the data and the patients will not have direct contact with
Yes, so we're working with our collaborators in Europe, and so there are a lot of rules that govern between Europe and the US. And so, for example, I think it might be best if you email me, and depending on your specific situation. So, for example, we work with investigators in England, and they may have partly their own registry, or Germany, and they may have their own registry. We're trying to get the registries aligned together. However, even with that, you can be part of our registry. You can be part of as many registries as you want. Our feeling from our group is we think our patients with this disease should work with as many groups as they can. And we're not trying to just be the only one. There are groups in Cyprus, England, Germany. We want you to work with everyone. But at the same time, you as a patient can work with our registry. Just email us. We would get you consented into the study. And you could send us a saliva sample, or maybe we know your mutation. And then what we would do is just collect your creatinines that you would get locally from your country whenever your doctor gets them. So please email us, and we'd love to get you into the registry or into our longitudinal study.
Great, thank you. Well, this has been fantastic, and we've had so many great questions and such a great discussion here. And Peter, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and stealth or non-stealth, it is still incredible work, and we wish we could recognize it even more than we can. And we look forward to the day when certainly this becomes more and more public, and we'll, of course, I'm sure you'll keep our entire community abreast of the progress here.
And thank you, Joe. I think it was important. And again, to this point, which several people have already said, we all are in this together, right? Patients, doctors, and the company, and together we will make progress. And you see, I wish I could share more, but I hope you guys understand we're really working hard and we are super excited. Stay tuned. And yeah, thank you very much.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is a good opportunity to take a little bit of a break. And why don't we take a break and come back at 5 minutes after the hour, and we'll be able to hear from Dr. Thompson from the FDA, which I know we're all very eager to, from whom we're very eager to hear. And so let's take a break for about 8 or 9 minutes here, and we'll see you at 5 minutes past the hour. Thanks so much. All right, I think we'll come on back and give folks a chance to join here. Always nice to be running a little ahead of schedule. That's a rare thing for us, but we're thrilled. We're thrilled at the opportunity now to hear from Dr. Aliza Thompson, who is from the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology in the Office of New Drugs at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at the FDA. Is that correct, Dr. Thompson? Hopefully I'm...
You nailed it.
Okay. Nothing like a massive organization, and we're so glad to have you and for your willingness to come and talk to us today. And so without any further ado, we'll hand the time over to you.
Great, thanks so much. So I just want to confirm, Drew, you can hear me, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Well, I just wanted to start off by first thanking Anna for introducing me to Drew, and Drew to thank you for inviting me to speak with you all today. I would say that this is an incredibly exciting time for drug development for kidney diseases in general. But also just want to note that, based on what I've heard both this morning as well as, yesterday in terms of what I could listen to yesterday, it sounds like this is also an incredibly exciting time for ADTKD. So, I think I heard Peter say during his talk, we are all in this together. And I think, I use a different phrase, which is successful drug development takes a village. And at the foundation of successful drug development is really an understanding of the basic science. And an investment in basic science, but it also takes a lot of other things. It takes a good understanding of the natural history of the disease. It takes tools to do effective and efficient trials. And I think you heard from Tony and others about efforts to develop those tools and to understand the natural history of disease. It also takes, industry being interested. And so it's exciting to hear about the stealth work that Peter is doing. But fundamentally, it takes an engaged patient community. And so, and an active and vocal one. So Drew, thanks so much for inviting me. And with that, I'm going to switch over to my slides, and at least assuming I'm successful in sharing them. So let's see if I can do this. Great. And can you see my my slides?
Yep.
Great. All right, so as Drew noted, my name is Aliza Thompson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology at the Food and Drug Administration. And I just wanted to start off the talk by giving you a brief orientation to where I work. I know that regulators and our agency can be a bit of a black box. And so, as you advance on this journey to developing safe and effective therapies, I wanted to give you a brief introduction to the FDA. I also want to note that just because this it sounds like this group participating today is really an international one. I just wanted to highlight that drug development is an international process, and we work closely across the regulatory regions. We're in touch with the different regulatory bodies, and even though I'm speaking about the US FDA, I think a lot of what you're going to hear today is common to your regulatory regions, and would argue, and I think my colleagues in other regions would also assert, that more unites us than divides us. So just at a very high level, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is tasked with ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of human drugs and drugs for animals, biological products, and medical devices. We're also charged with ensuring the safety of our food supply in the U.S., cosmetics, and products that emit radiation. And we're a large agency. We have over 18,000 And the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research is tasked with making sure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the health of people in the United States. And in your regulatory regions, I would say you your regulators are charged with doing this, but doing it for the people that live in your regulatory regions.
Dr. Thompson, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think we lost your slides.
Let me see. Should I try sharing again?
Yeah, I think the sharing just stopped.
All right, I'm going to close out and try again. If I do this poorly multiple times, I may have someone else. Can you see it again?
Yeah, we can.
All right, let's try this again. Can you see my slides now?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. So where I work within the Center for Drug Evaluation Research is the Office of New Drugs. And this office regulates specifically the development and approval of new drugs or new uses of already approved drugs. And we monitor their safety as well. And so we're really the reviewers, the people who review drug applications. So when Peter was talking about his studies that will come forward, we will review those studies. The minute Peter moves from testing his drug in animals to people, we get involved. We oversee the studies to make sure it's safe for people to participate in them. And as the studies proceed through development, we help work with Peter and companies like Peter's companies to make sure that the data that they're collecting is ultimately going to be the data that we're going to need to opine on whether the drug should be approved and available to patients living in the U.S. We're also charged with not just giving guidance to pharmaceutical companies, but we also work with, the larger stakeholder community, you all, because you need to be at the center of this. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we make these decisions about whether the drug enters the market. And to make that decision, it's this question of whether essentially effectiveness was shown, as well as whether the benefits outweigh the risks. I think we all know drugs, even though, we talk about drugs being safe and effective, all drugs have risks. The issue is more just that the benefits outweigh them. And again, where I work in the division that focuses on drug development for cardiac and kidney disease. I trained as a kidney doctor and I've been at the agency for 14 years. Can you still see my slides? I'll do my quick check. Yes, okay, good. All right, so with that high level overview, I want to focus on two topics today. First is drug development for rare diseases and FDA's role, as well as the second topic, which is patient-focused drug development. So really putting you all at the center of what we do when we develop therapies. I think that, a question was asked earlier about, to Peter in terms of, are you going to make a profit here or why, why are you in this space, Peter, other than, wanting to do the right thing? And I just want to highlight that though developing therapies for rare diseases is incredibly challenging, and it's challenging because the populations are small and because we often lack the tools that Tony and others are trying to develop, meaning a good understanding of the natural history of disease or just the tools that we're going to use to figure out who should enter a trial or assess the efficacy of new therapies. I want to highlight that if you look at it, we're actually doing a lot better these days in terms of developing therapies for rare diseases than common ones. If you look at our drug approvals in 2020, in fact, 60% almost of our novel drug approvals were actually approvals for rare or orphan diseases. So why is that? Well, some of it's because I think the science has advanced and we're able to develop precision medicines like the therapy that Peter was talking about. But I think a lot of it also has to do, at least in the US, with legislation that was passed in the 1980s. Essentially, there was widespread recognition that if industry was going to develop drugs for rare diseases, it would need to be financially viable to do so. And so the Orphan Drug Act of 1983 essentially gave or provided for economic incentives to make drug development for rare diseases attractive financially viable. I want to emphasize that the law is not, in this specific law, is not about the standards for approval. It's not about the evidence needed for approval, but really it was the idea and the intent was to create financial incentives to ensure that people who live with rare diseases actually have safe and effective therapies, just like people who live with common diseases. Again, want to emphasize that the law was not about changing the standards for approval, though they do allow for more flexibility as well as scientific judgment into determining how the standards are met. And that standard is really a standard of substantial evidence of effectiveness. I want to highlight that that is our standard. It's our standard for common diseases as well as rare. And I just want to also emphasize that flexibility does not mean anything goes, that you can give us any data you have and we'll say your drug works for this rare disease. What I think it does mean is that when we design the trials, when we look at the evidence supporting the use of a therapy, we just have to be smarter. We have to be better at how we do this than maybe how we do it for common diseases. But I think we can be smart and I think we can be good. And there are a lot of people who are thinking about just in general how we can really be efficient and effective in designing trials for rare diseases. Another thing that I think has helped, at least on this side of the Atlantic and facilitating the development of therapies for rare diseases is programs that we have that are intended to expedite and facilitate the development and review of therapies for drugs intended to treat serious diseases with unmet medical need, diseases where we don't have other approved therapies. And I put the name of some of these programs. They probably mean more to Peter than they really mean to you all. But in essence, the goal of these programs is to enable more interactions between the drug development community and the FDA about, for the product to really facilitate the really rapid development and rapid review of the product so that we can get it to patients more quickly. And the reason why this is really expediting, I think, drug development for rare diseases is because a lot of the rare diseases out there are serious or life-threatening, and they have unmet medical need, meaning we don't have other therapies to treat them. So a lot of these rare diseases qualify for programs such as this. So with that, I want to switch to my second topic, and that's really about placing you all at the center of drug development. I think what you've heard from Anna, from Drew, from Peter, from Tony, is how you really need to be involved in this process, that how you really need to drive this process. I think it's ironic. It should go without saying that patients really need to be at the center of the drug development process, right? These therapies are being developed for you. You're the ones who are going to use them ultimately. But unfortunately, we sort of lost track of that along the way. Patients weren't really being placed at the center of the process. And I think if you look not just within, it's beyond FDA, I know other regulatory regions are doing this, and even beyond drug development, I think there's a broader recognition that patients need to be the ones leading the process. Their voices need to be heard in this, that they're again, the critical people here. And so, at FDA, we now have a number of initiatives in place that are intended to place patients at the center of the drug development process. And I think the key theme here is what's shown on this slide. I mean, you all are the experts in what it's like to live with these diseases. And ultimately, you're going to use these therapies. So you're uniquely positioned to really inform our understanding as regulators about how these products should be developed for you as well as evaluated for you. If you think about this program that we've set up at FDA, it's really divided into two sort of larger bins. One big bin is really what I'll call the science part. And then the other bin is really about listening to patients and understanding what matters to them. By the science part, I'll explain it this way. So if you talk to one patient about their disease and what matters to them and what they want out of therapies and how they weigh risks versus benefits and tolerance risks, I would say you've talked to one patient. And if you talk to two patients, you've talked to two patients, which is all to say that you all experience your disease, even though it's perhaps called the same disease in very different ways. And so one key issue in terms of the science aspect of getting patient input is how do we get it in a systematic way so that we can collect really robust and meaningful data from patients and their caregivers that we can use as regulators to inform our decisions. So that's the science aspect. Another aspect of this, though, is really about, I think, listening to you and getting you actively engaged in the process. So one aspect of this is really how do we make participation in trials more attractive to the community, less burdensome? I mean, you are people who are patients are living with the disease, but they're living with it. You know, they're not defined by the disease. They have to go out and earn an income or take care of their families. They also have to, frankly, go out and enjoy their lives. And so how can we make it easier for people to participate in trials such that, you know, that they can do so and yet go on and live their lives in a meaningful way? And another thing that we're trying to understand and use this program to address is get a better understanding of patient preferences in their acceptability of the trade-offs between treatment benefits and risks. And this goes back to sort of, you know, the point that I made earlier, and I think Peter may have made this as well, which is, look, the idea is not that a therapy is entirely safe, that it has no risks associated with it. But the question is really, what is an acceptable risk given this benefit? And you can't have a regulator deciding this and just saying, you know, well, how would I think about this? What you need to understand as a patient and for people who live with the disease, how they view what are acceptable trade-offs between benefits and risks. We really need to have that understanding to inform the decisions we make about whether a risk of a therapy is acceptable given the benefits that were shown in the development program. And then finally, the last piece of this is really about, well, how do we, you know, the information that we collect on drugs and understanding their risks and benefits, how do we then translate that, you know, those findings in a trial to the patients, the people who are ultimately going to take these therapies so they can make the decision ultimately about whether a drug that's approved is right for them? How do we do that, and how do we do that effectively? And so just want to highlight, you know, really something that's been, I think, truly wonderful for me as a regulator is having the opportunity to hear from patient groups. At the FDA, we have this program where there are what are called externally led patient-focused drug development meetings. Essentially, for a day, we listen to patients and we listen to patients and hear, you know, specifically focused around the disease, what matters to them. We hear about available therapies, what they want from future therapies. We also use it as an opportunity to probe questions around trial design, as well as an understanding of, you know, tolerance for risk. So some of the questions that we might try to understand with trial design, and this harkens back to, I think, a question that came up yesterday in comments Anna has made is, okay, well, if we're going to use a biopsy to look at and to assess whether a therapy is effective, you know, you have to ask the question, you know, is a patient going to actually enroll in a trial that requires them to do repeated kidney biopsies? You know, they have to get one at baseline and then they have to get one, you know, 6 months later or a year later. Is that something that's going to be a turnoff to patients such that they wouldn't participate in a trial like that? We need to understand those things so that, again, we can develop therapies effectively and efficiently. And so here I proudly show, you know, we've had a really wonderful opportunity to talk to a lot of, you know, different patient communities. These are all examples from the kidney disease space. A lot of them, you know, some of them ultra rare diseases, in fact. But it was really a wonderful opportunity, and also just want to highlight, after these one-day meetings, the communities put together a Voice of the Patient report, which I think really serves as a roadmap, not just to FDA, but also to industry as we design trials in these disease spaces. So with that, I'll close and maybe end where I began with this concept. Want to emphasize that it takes a village to successfully develop drugs. And ultimately, as well, we need to place you all, the patient community, at the center of this process. You're the experts in the disease. You will ultimately use these therapies. And so you really need to be engaged. You need to drive this. And I think my last slide just tells you how to reach me. So let's see if hopefully I can figure out how to stop sharing. Did that work?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. My goodness, I mean, this is your day to day, but for us, that is incredibly exciting to hear. Again, you're right. It does kind of feel like a black box at times. And so to kind of see, okay, this is happening, patients should and can be involved, and to see that 58% of rare disease, of new therapies for rare disease. I mean, that's just incredibly exciting. So thank you so much for joining us. We have a few questions. I don't know if you have a few minutes to take those. And some of these are pretty specific. And so maybe you can, we can also bring in some of the other folks as well. First one is, given the somewhat slow progression of this disease, the eGFR loss of 1 to 5 milliliter per minute per year, can the burden of substantial evidence of efficacy shift to well-justified biomarkers of disease activity? For example, could reduction of the mutant protein burden in the kidney and reduction of the tubular cell stress be potential measures of efficacy?
Right. And so you've gotten it exactly. So just if you think about how we approve therapies in the US, we approve them either because you showed an effect on what we call a clinically meaningful endpoint, how a patient feels, functions, or survives, or a surrogate endpoint. A surrogate endpoint is typically something you measure in the blood or urine, or can find on a biopsy finding or imaging. And the reason we can approve the therapies based on that is because there's a body of scientific evidence that give us confidence that having an effect on that thing I measured in the blood or urine or that biopsy finding, that will ultimately translate into a meaningful effect on the outcome you're trying to prevent. So in this case, if you had evidence, mechanistic evidence, other evidence that would provide confidence that changing, something on a biopsy or changing the levels of something I measure in the blood or urine, that's going to translate into an effect on kidney failure over the long term, then certainly that would be used and could be used. And just want to highlight, I don't know, Drew, if Drew's had a chance, but one of the organizations where I suggested he talk to was an organization that focuses on development of therapies for a very rare disease, primary hyperoxaluria. And they recently had a therapy approved for primary hyperoxaluria type 1 based on the amount of oxalate in the urine. We understood enough about the disease to have confidence that would translate ultimately into a benefit in terms of preventing progression to kidney failure. So that's exactly right. But what it takes is a body of evidence to support that thing that you're measuring in the urine or the blood or the biopsy. And certainly the studies that Tony is doing and others are doing, will help us understand hopefully that issue better.
Thank you. Another question, just do you have a relationship, and I think I know the answer to this, but do you have a relationship and do you cooperate with the European Agency of Medicine?
Very much so. So, as was noted earlier, drug development is an international process. Trials enroll patients from all different regions. And as regulators, the question we ask is, or we have no expectation that everyone enrolls in a trial from our region, but at the end of the day, what we want to understand is whether the trial showed efficacy in our segment, or it's good reason to believe it would be effective in the people who live in our region. We have cluster calls for rare diseases. We get on the phone and talk to each other. Some of these other programs as well. We have another group that focuses specifically on kidney diseases. We have another group that focuses specifically on pediatric development. There's a lot of these different forums that we have, and not just forums where we meet on a set schedule, but also, we'll reach out. We have a liaison from the EMA, the European Medicines Agency. We'll say, we need to talk. Can you help figure out who on your end we need to talk to? So I've had a lot of fun meeting some of my regulatory counterparts from the other regions. And as I've noted before, I would say more unites us than divides us in terms of how we think about drug development and trials, and understand the need very much to work together. So that, the single drug development program can satisfy all needs of the different regulatory regions.
Thank
I
you.
just ask a quick question. Dr. Thompson, that was really just such a nice talk, and we just really value working with you guys, and especially the safety parts and all you've done. Marie Hogan, one of our collaborators, great doctor at the Mayo Clinic, she had a question. What about like, how do we run the trial with sites? First of all, it's a rare disease, but the other problem is patients are all over. So we may have like 5 patients in Winston-Salem. They may be 3 in Minnesota and 2 in San Diego. And have you seen challenges like that before? And how do you guys work with that?
Yeah, great question. So there is a shift, right, to doing decentralized trials, right? And again, this speaks to, and by decentralized, what I mean, is, it's no longer this drive very far or fly very far to get to Mayo. Everyone has to get there. A lot of this, the idea is you can do it remotely, right? We're shifting that way, and we're shifting that way because we want to minimize burden on patients. I think this process of shifting that way has also been accelerated by the pandemic. Frankly, during the pandemic, patients couldn't go into trial sites to, get this or that measured. We had to have, or, companies would have people go into the homes, or patients would, do the samples different ways, doing labs locally. All of this is sort of where we're evolving in terms of how we do trials, because again, we need to place the patients at the center. We need to make this least burdensome. We also, frankly, need to engage the clinician community. I mean, this idea of trials just being run out of few very specialized centers, that's not what we want. We need the specialists involved in driving this, but some of this can be done sort of more remotely. You don't need people to drive so far to do some of this, but I don't know if others want to comment on this issue, but I think that's really where we need to go.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. I fully agree with what you just said. And again, in my past company where we did an FSGS trial, that obviously they were doing the clinical piece right during COVID, and exactly what you said. One has to engage, one has to do it decentral. And also we live, after all, we have social media, and if done meaningful, you can talk to people. And one of the So I completely support and agree, and we saw that. Second point, what I want to make. So we're building for Sail Bio, we're building a website. We're working with a company that is in this communication space, and they asked me what I want. I said, I want a clear website, not fancy, not for the doctors, not for the specialists, not for designers, where patients can go on, or people who have a relative in their family, and when they find us, they can understand, aha, here's something, and I can go there, and from there I can get help, right? It's about being clear, right? And I think we can do it, but we need to be mindful. When I always say, when you look up what I'm on my website at Atlas, it says that patients are at the center of my work, and I mean that. We need to think from the patient. We all have, or maybe at some point, I have been patient for other stuff. When you're a patient, it's a complete different experience, right? And this vulnerability, understanding it, and then working with it, I think it's very important, because after all, the drug should help the patient, not the doctor, not those who make money off it. It's for the patient. And if we have, then I think we just saw this beautifully in this slide with the village, we can do it. But yeah, you have to be engaged, but that's why it's also important to be here. If you as patient community know that something is coming, we can go back to you and say, hey, work with us. Work with us. There's the FDA, there's the company, there's the doctors, there are the patients. Let's all do it together. That's how we get success. And even if it's more remote,
Thank you to you both. I think we had a live raised hand from Cindy. Cindy, do you have a question you wanted to ask Dr. Thompson live? Oh, maybe not. We'll come back to Cindy if she does. Let me go to another question that we had from John. How is it that drugs are approved in one region and not in another? What's the real answer there?
Sometimes it's actually because sponsors have decided to, or pharmaceutical companies have decided to, pursue a marketing application in one region and not another, or the order in which they pursue it. Sometimes they don't submit their applications at the same time. It's also true that sometimes regulators looking at the same body of evidence can arrive at different conclusions about whether the standards for effectiveness and safety have been met. And I don't want to, we're people, and I'm going to argue, just like if you talk to clinicians sometimes when drugs are approved, there's sometimes a diversity of opinion among clinicians about whether therapies are safe and effective. Also, even among patients, I will tell you that I have gotten sometimes letters after products have been approved where patients have even sometimes expressed outrage that I approved it or that I was involved in the process that approved it for a certain disease because they don't think that it's actually a good therapy for their disease. So it's hard, some of these, sometimes it's really black and white, sometimes it's a little bit gray.
Sure, thank you. I had a comment from Cynthia Hahn. I agree wholeheartedly with the concept of clinician education about these diseases. I've seen 2 nephrologists over the last decade, neither of whom had heard of these diseases. What have you seen there, Dr. Thompson, in terms of like really trying to engage the clinician community and maybe successfully on these really rare diseases where maybe it's just not on their radar?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the rare disease communities grapple with this issue. And I think that, I'll point to something like the NephCure Foundation. I think they've really launched into efforts working with, and the NephCure Foundation focuses on rare diseases. They call them protein spilling diseases. So they can be associated with, progression to kidney failure, but also just have horrible, manifestations in terms of just a lot of swelling of the body. These are diseases that can affect not just adults, but young children. And where they focused, I think, some of their efforts as well is really trying to get, keep the clinician or the nephrologist at the center of the care of the patient, the patient's one, but also connecting them to these, centers of excellence as well, so that they can really talk to people who have expertise. I think though, Peter and others highlighted, when a disease is rare and there's no therapies for it, often until there's an effective therapy, people don't look for it. And so I think that is another issue, but would encourage you to reach out to these other communities and to look to sort of what they're doing to really get their disease front and center. Certainly you'll see a lot now about people in the industry who are exploring therapies for genetic diseases, highlighting the importance of, and offering free testing and really just getting it out there. But Peter, I think hit it on the nail. A lot of this also just has to be to both the nephrology community and the patient community. It just has to, we have to present the information in a way that's digestible and make it easy for them then to take the next step of, okay, who do I go to next, or who do I connect this person to?
Great, thank you so much. And I think we maybe have one more question for this segment, and it may be for Dr. Thompson or Dr. Mundel or Dr. Bleyer. Who will be eligible? Oh yeah, I think this is who will be eligible for participating in a clinical trial. In particular, what about young adults who have the genetic mutation but haven't shown any loss in kidney function yet?
And this is for Peter, I assume.
I think this is probably more of a-
and okay, you will get my answer here right now, right? Because we haven't spoken to the FDA yet. I'm not going out here and saying who will be eligible, right? There are different ways to do it, right? And because it comes back to what do you need to show in a clinical trial? It's too early. If I take a step back, let's say we have done a clinical trial in people who already have some change in their kidney function because they are more advanced and we see benefit there. Of course, it's conceivable to then go back to people who are young, who still have preserved normal kidney function, say you take the preventive. But I would just not feel comfortable at this point when we have not. There are so many unanswered questions. I don't want to promise anything which then I need to walk back. Does it make sense?
I'm glad we were able to put you on the hot seat there with the FDA listening, Peter.
Wow.
That's great.
No, it's not a hot seat, but it's just, look, this is, you just heard from Aliza, this is, and I lived through this with FSGS because, and with NEFCA and all that stuff, that was in my past, right? We need to be thoughtful, right? And we need to find the right trial and we need, which is the right population where we start first, right? I don't want to be evasive, but we haven't thought about it. There are different ways to go about it. We heard so many things about, you can take a biopsy, you can take biomarkers, you can take rapid progressive, slow progressive. There's a whole kind of myriad of questions that need to be addressed. And as I said, at Sale Bio, we will now, in the coming month, hire a clinical team to really map this all out. And so I don't want to say anything without really having a basis. But of course, in theory, it is clear. Once you have a drug that's working, removing the mutant protein from those with already where the kidney function goes down, or we can preserve further decline. Of course, ideally preventive medicine, right? That's what everybody's about, prevention, but it needs to be mapped out. I don't want to promise anything without a solid foundation.
And I just want to maybe add quickly to the point that was just been made. I want to encourage people to think of clinical trials as a tool. It's a tool, and what we're trying to do is figure out how most effectively and efficiently figure out if a therapy is effective. A different issue is once you know whether a therapy is effective and efficient, are the decisions one makes about who it should be used in. And we always, whenever we approve a drug, it's never just limited, very rarely just limited to the trial population in which you had studied. It often has a much broader indication. And I think also, as Peter highlighted, that there can be steps here. Initially, you study it in this population. Later, you say, okay, now that I understand it's pretty safe, maybe I want to go and look at this in people with really early stage disease. Or sometimes you don't even need to do that because you get such a broad indication and everyone says, yeah, let's just use it here. But yeah, just think of a trial as a tool. It's really about how do I figure out if a drug is safe and effective? How do I do this most effectively, most efficiently?
I just wanted to echo the comments of both of the panelists in that we don't know what group the trial is going to be for. And so we don't want to get caught like saying, okay, well, we're going to do stage 3 chronic kidney disease. And then, whoops, we should have taken patients with early who have almost normal kidney function and they're not in our registry and we have to go find them. So what we want to do is have the whole group of patients so that when the time comes that we can present. And of course, if you're in our registry, it does not mean you're going to be in the clinical trial. That's a whole different step. If you're in our registry, then we'll present you the information about the trial and you'll decide. And there's not going to be a whole transfer of information about all the patients. It's going to be based on what you want. So just getting as many people as we can who are interested, and then from those, there'll be a group that'll be best met to fit a clinical trial to show that this drug works.
Thank you. And I think what we're feeling here is the excitement from the patient community, really, about the potential here. And of course, the regulators and and of course the scientists and everyone's involved in saying, okay, how do we actually do this? But I think what we're all feeling is that this is suddenly feeling very real. And even if we're in earlier days than we all want to be, it's incredibly encouraging and very exciting. And so of course we're all asking, do we take it 3 times a day, as if that's just because we're so excited to get there. So thank you so much for the very thoughtful explanations and certainly guiding us through, Dr. Thompson, the regulatory framework that we'll be working in here. And again, as someone mentioned, coming in on a Saturday as well, which again, a rare, and I think you mentioned to me, a rare gap in your schedule that you were even willing to come in on a Saturday. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time this morning, or this morning for me at least, still, and Dr. Mundel as well. And we're now going to move into another segment focused on ADTKD and COVID, which is something I know Dr. Bleyer and his team get a lot of questions about. And so we'll hand it over to Dr. Bleyer and Kendrah Kidd and let you take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to share screen 1 here, and let's see if when I do this, it goes to screen 1. Yes, there we go. Okay, very good. So it's going to be about COVID, but we're also going to have a few other things we're going to talk about. So first of all, one of my colleagues retired recently, and he said, one thing you want to do is to know what your true north is. And so our true north here at Wake Forest is we're the Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team, and our goal is to help one patient, one family at a time. And a lot of you have interacted with our team, so I just wanted to show you our team members. So this is Alice Kim, and she is responsible for all of the samples in our lab, and which is a really hugely important job. Lauren is one of our members of our team who takes in patients, especially for the 21 study, and works a lot with the MUC1 patients. Vicki has been with our team, our nurse, for many, many years, and she works with all different patient groups and is just fantastic. Kendrah, of course, is our research scientist, leads our database, incredible worker with our team. And here is Abby, who's also one of our research coordinators. And just to show you all the tremendous collaborators that we have throughout the world, our friends in Prague. I should have Dr. Wiesener on here. I need him on here. There's so many great collaborators, Cyprus, the Mayo Clinic, and then of course the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation and our friends in Italy. And so it's really been great. And the Broad Institute, oh my gosh, can't forget them. So it's been really great working with so many different groups. So first I'm going to talk about knowing your mutation, then our observational study, which we already talked about a little bit, and then I will discuss COVID-19. So the disease that we are looking at is autosomal dominant tubulointerstitial kidney disease. So autosomal dominant means the disease occurs in one allele of one gene, which we'll talk about in a minute. There is no blood or protein in the urine. Variable rate of progression of chronic kidney disease, with some individuals requiring transplant or dialysis in their 20s, while others do not require it until past 70, with the median age, average age of kidney disease, kidney failure to transplant or dialysis of about 45. And there are a number of diseases under ADTKD, but the 2 major ones we deal with are UMOD and MUC1, and also with renin mutations. And so this is autosomal dominant. So everybody has 2 copies of each gene, one from the father and one from the mother. And let's just say this parent is affected with ADTKD. And so they have 1 abnormal gene and 1 normal gene. And they marry someone who's unaffected. And then they'll have children. And so they'll get 1 gene. The children will get 1 gene from 1 parent and 1 gene from another parent. They'll always get a normal gene from the unaffected parent, But from the affected parent, they'll either get this gene or this gene. If they get the affected gene, they will have the disease, and then their children will be like them, and their children will have a 50% chance of having disease. If they get the unaffected gene from the parent, then they will not have the disease, and their children will not have the disease. And the gene is not linked to anything. So like I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said, well, I'm really worried my son might have this disease because he has the same build as my husband who has the disease. And that's actually is incorrect. It really does not track with eye color, hair, temperament, anything at all. It's just very much random as to whether a child will be affected. If someone has all right, and so we went over that. And so then there are two types of the disease. And if you're unsure what type you have, please send us an email and we'll help you find out. I think it's becoming increasingly important. Even though the diseases behave very similarly, it's really important to know which type you have. So the UMOD gene makes a protein called uromodulin. And here's a tubule, a nephron, which is a unit. So we have 1 million nephrons in the kidney. And this is the filtering part, the glomerulus that filters the urine. And this is the tubule. And in the tubule, this is the only place in the body where the UMOD is expressed. So UMOD makes uromodulin, and it's expressed only in this area of the tubule in the kidney and no other organs. And when you have a mutation in UMOD, it's like having Lego blocks with the knobs on top. And instead of having a round knob, you have a square knob. And you can imagine that you would not be able to build your Lego project. And in the same way, our patients are not able to form the normal UMOD molecule. And so then instead of having the normal formation of the molecule can't form regularly and gets stuck within the cell, and that leads to chronic kidney disease. MUC1 makes a different protein, so you may have the MUC1 mutation. MUC1 is a membrane-anchored protein, like mucus from your nose. And MUC1 here is the part that's outside the cell, and it has sugars that bind to it that gives it its sticky protective covering. MUC1 sits on the surface of cells in the kidney, lungs, bladder, breast, and stomach. The MUC1 mutation is an addition of an extra letter in the DNA, and it adds usually a C after 7 C coding elements. And so it changes the way the molecule was read. Similarly to if you were reading this sentence, I took the dog for a walk, and you added an extra O and moved everything over a letter, you're getting something that's totally different. And so here we see in the MUC1 gene, the addition, so it's kind of like typing, right? There are 7 C's in a row, and an 8th C is put in by accident. And when this happens, it changes how the amino acids, all of the upcoming amino acids get changed. So in the MUC1 patients, remember there's one normal allele, one normal gene producing the MUC1, and then there's an abnormal one. And this one makes this protein deposit in the cell, gets stuck in the cell, and this leads to a slow progressive tubule cell death. And I like to think of it, it's like plastic in the ocean. It just sits there, the body has never seen this protein before. It doesn't cause kidney failure right away, but over many years, it leads to slow progressive loss of kidney function. If we look at the age of onset of kidney disease for MUC1 or UMOD families, they follow a similar pattern. So here's a family. Each family is one column. So here's 3 family members. And this is the age of end-stage kidney disease for this family. And so this person, very, very young, our youngest person went on dialysis about 15 or got a transplant. This one at 28. And we can see all the families are different based on their mutation. But look at this family here. So they all have the same mutation. And a family member went on dialysis or needed a transplant at 25. And a family member in the same family not until 80. And so the reason for this variation is unclear. We don't think it's due just to like, that this person followed their diet better or had better blood pressure control, though we think those things are important. We think there are other genetic factors that are unrelated that are affecting the response to the mutated protein. So we were talking about how we're always trying to get more patients. And so, in 1996, there were only about 10 families that were known to have this disease in the US. So we've been referred 199 families from patients, directly from patients that their doctors didn't refer. And I'm sure a lot of you in our group today are in that group. 404 families from academic doctors, 252 from doctors in private practice. We now have 207 families with UMOD mutations encompassing 526 patients, 118 families with MUC1 mutations encompassing 358 patients, 17 families with REAN, and we have the other conditions that we're still studying. So what's in a name? So the names, so we had a really big problem with this disease early on. I don't want to mention the early name for the disease. It used to be called medullary cystic kidney disease, which was just totally wrong. And so we've been working, changing the name, but it turns out that there are a lot of genetic naming organizations that are striving to get names that are better. And so we go by ADTKD-UMOD or MUC1. But we have a shortened patient name, which is UMOD kidney disease or MUC1 kidney disease. And these 4 letters are the important part of the name. Because if you go to any doctor and you say, I have a UMOD mutation or I have a MUC1 mutation, they should be able to look up and find out about these conditions. The rest of the name may change based on the future and how societies decide to name different diseases, but this name will never change. And so if you go in and you know these 4 letters, you're going to be able to present this. So, and I like to think of it like libraries. Here's a very beautiful library. We visited Strahov Monastery in Prague. And let's just think, every disease has a library. There's a UMOD, a MUC1, a PKD, polycystic kidney disease library, and other mutations as well. So what do you need to get into the library? You need your library card. And so your library card is either MUC1 or UMOD, so you know which one it is. And then when you get into that library, you'll see all of the books. And so your doctor can go in this library, find all the articles about this by just typing UMOD into the search bar for our articles. And then you're also exposed to the doctors, right? So that, and this is Dr. Lander. I wish, the only thing with Dr. Greco wasn't here. She would be right here. And Dr. Kamach and myself. So once you know the name of your disease, this can help your doctor and help you to get in contact. So if you don't know if you have MUC1 or UMOD, please let us know and we'll help you with that. Then the observational study. So this is our 21 study, 2021. And we were following patients before. We were having them send us their labs. And then we had several patients in a biomarker study where we were getting biomarker collections every 4 months. And what we wanted to do is change from studying a small group of patients to getting a very large group of patients that we follow prospectively. And as you can see, our team is limited in size, so we can't individually ask everybody to go to the lab every 4 months or do a questionnaire every 4 months. So we decided that we were going to try to take advantage of email and automation to and have our patients be part of the process, our participants, so that now we have a study where our participants get an email reminder to go to the lab every 4 months. We don't have to contact them personally. So we get a collection of biomarkers at baseline, and then our participants go to the lab every 4 months and they fill out a brief survey every 4 months. And this is for UMOD and MUC1 mutations and for patients who are not on dialysis or transplanted. The purpose is to characterize progression of kidney disease and to learn about factors associated with progression of kidney disease. And as we've talked about, to prepare for a future clinical trial. But you can be part of this study and not be part of the future clinical trial. So this is just, like I said before, all this data is just staying with us here at Wake Forest. How many patients do we have so far? We have 50 patients in the MUC1 group and 54 in the UMOD group. And I'd like to raise this number to 200 in each group. And I just got some of the data to show you. So the average age of the patients in the MUC1 group is 44 and in the UMOD group, 44. Most patients are non-smokers, which is great. We have few who are vegetarians. We're interested in looking at diet. So we're looking at, we'll be studying this in our study. A third of MUC1 patients have have high blood pressure, and half of UMOD patients. And then this is based on the stage of kidney disease. And so most of the patients are in stage 3 kidney disease. But as we talked about before, we'd like to get a lot more who are in stage 1 as well. We've had 104 go through, get enrolled, 86 completed the initial visit, 59 had the laboratory studies that they're doing. And so we're doing really well. And a big part of this project is to try to get more patients into it. And the other thing is that the patients just automatically go to the lab every 4 months. We're making great progress as we prepare for a future clinical trial. So now I'd like to talk about COVID-19. We will be discussing COVID-19 and kidney disease. We will be discussing COVID-19 and vaccination. We respect each person's decision-making, so everyone has to make their own decision about this. We are discussing the current status of COVID-19 and vaccination in an ever-evolving and changing pandemic. And a challenge for a lot of doctors, including myself, is we have to make a lot of decisions. And the decisions, you know, we talked about the FDA, and when we have a drug for the treatment of our disease, it'll have a clinical trial and we'll know how to use it. But every day things are changing with COVID and we have to make decisions. So for specific information, I'm going to present general information, but for specific information regarding your health, please contact your doctor. I don't have to tell everybody there have been 254 million cases of COVID. And there have been 5 million deaths from COVID. And there have also been 7 billion doses of vaccine administered throughout the world. Who is the most likely to die? So, right, I mean, there are several groups of patients. So young, healthy patients without any disease, they in general do okay with COVID. They can get sick, lose their sense of taste and smell, but in general, they do much better than patients in this group. So patients who are older than 60, patients with obesity, patients with type A blood, patients with chronic kidney disease, and patients who've undergone kidney transplantation. So what are the risks for this? So here's a very huge study that looked at medical records of 17 million people. And they looked at people who died of COVID. And so this is the probability of dying of COVID. And we can see that as age increases, this is the oldest group right here, greater than 80, the risk of dying of COVID goes up very much over time compared to patients who are younger. So the older you are with COVID, the higher the risk. Then this is a plot, and this is the risk of dying. So here is if you're just at normal risk, just the risk of the general population of everybody together. And this is increased risk, and this is if your risk of dying of COVID is twice as high, 5 times as high, or 10 times as high. And I'm gonna blow this up on the next slide. And you can see here, so what are some of the big risk factors? So again, if you're greater than 80, you have a 10 times greater risk of dying than people who are 40 years old or 50 years old. What if you're a man? you have a significantly increased risk of dying from COVID than women. Obesity significantly increased. And for our population, you have an increased risk if your GFR is low. And if your GFR is less than 30, your risk is 2.5 times as high. Also, if you have a kidney transplant, you have a markedly increased risk of having a bad outcome with COVID. So these factors are really important for our patients, right? Because we have a lot of patients who have reduced kidney function and a lot of patients who've had a kidney transplant. Is vaccination safe? So over 5 billion vaccine doses have been given. Appears to be very safe in all groups. So I'll tell you, I was in the Moderna clinical trial and I got into that trial. I was one of the first patients in the US to get the vaccine. The reason I got into the trial was because I wanted to make sure the vaccine was safe for my patients. So I got in the trial, I got the vaccine very early. My wife got in the trial as well. We didn't know if we would get the placebo or the vaccine, and she also got the vaccine. And so we've been followed by Moderna for the last year, and I have an app on my phone that I have to fill out once a week. And if I get a sniffle, they'll call me within 5 minutes and say, "Are you okay?" So they're really, really following these adverse events. I know the doctor who runs the Moderna trial here, he's a friend of mine, and his wife is a friend of my wife, right? So the doctor who runs the trial here, we've had thousands of people in the trial, and his wife got in the study, right? So I don't think his wife got the vaccine. So I don't think his wife would have gotten the vaccine if he would have had concerns. And so in general, I feel the vaccine is very, very safe. Is vaccination safe in ADTKD? So what about for our patients, is it safe? And I think the overwhelming answer is yes. There's no evidence that vaccination will worsen ADTKD. There's no evidence of increased risk of kidney transplant rejection. No, I should say no definitive evidence, and we've looked at this. There's been several patients who've contacted us. In several, we ruled out that there was any risk at all. And I think a lot of rises in creatinine over time may have been related to missing labs due to COVID and things like that. So, but from what we can tell right now, it's extremely safe. It's extremely safe in the general transplant population. It's extremely safe in the CKD population, and it's extremely safe in the general population. And of course, the question is, it's safe not to get vaccinated. And so I'm dealing with this now. I know there's a lot of, political questions about this. I'm not saying mandate vaccine. I'm not for that. But from just a regular doctor point of view, it seems like everybody I haven't seen anyone who's gotten the vaccine who's had any bad outcomes at all. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people die who did not get the vaccine. I was on call in the hospital 3 weekends ago, and we were in the middle of our outbreak, and we had 58 patients in our ICUs with COVID, and 57 of those patients were unvaccinated. So I do feel that vaccination is safe and it's helpful in our adults, especially with ADTKD. So people say, well, what about long-term effects of the vaccine? And it is true, we don't know the long-term effects. We know that all the vaccines that have been studied before have not been shown to have long-term effects. I don't know the long-term effects of most new medications either. And as you know, we're thinking of getting a new drug. We're hoping very much a new drug for treatment of ADTKD. And that, again, we won't know the long-term effects. What are long-term effects of cell phones? We don't know that as well. What are long-term effects of new foods? So for example, I love Chipotle peppers, and I was thinking, well, gosh, I've only been eating them the last several years. So I guess they're part of Mexican cuisine for a long time, but how about how they're made? What about GMO? So we don't know the long-term effects of many, many different things. But we do know short-term that there's a lot of COVID and that patients do die of COVID. So ADTKD, to me, it's all about family. And I have, my mom is older, she's 93. And so we're running into these similar issues that all families are experiencing. So, and 50% of family members have ADTKD, right? So there are a lot of your family members will have ADTKD. Some of them will have chronic kidney disease. Some of them will be transplanted. We know too that vaccination is less effective in CKD in transplant patients. We know that vaccination of unaffected individuals will help to create a zone around individuals who are vaccinated to prevent disease. So let's just take this family here. So we have the grandparents who are at high risk, right, because of age. And here's the dad who had a kidney transplant. Here's the mom, maybe she's working at in healthcare, let's just say, and she has a lot of contact with patients. And here are the children. And so we need to come up, right, with a plan. I know Thanksgiving is coming up, but the same way for all of us, right? And we need to come up with a plan. And the plan is to try to protect these individuals as much as possible. And so, of course, we advocate vaccination for these individuals. We think it's really important. But we know the vaccination may not work as well. And we'll be talking about the vaccine and how boosters can help in a minute. But we also know that if this patient's wife is vaccinated, then that can help prevent her from getting COVID and help to keep him from getting sicker. And then what about children? What if you're a healthy family, young family, not much exposure to grandparents, no sick adults in the family? So that's one group. But then what if these children are at higher risk for COVID, they haven't gotten COVID, and then they're visiting their grandparents or they have at-risk parents? So these are all issues that all of us are dealing with right now. And I think I'd like to just take all the politics out of it, which, you know, is very disappointing, frankly, and just think that we know that these vaccinations have been highly effective at preventing COVID and decreasing death from COVID. Okay, should I get a booster? All right, so for transplant patients, it's not called a booster. It's just called the third vaccine, but it's basically the booster. So yes, transplant patients should receive the vaccine 3 times. And what you can do is you can get a COVID-19 antibody level to see if the vaccine worked. And so I'm actually doing that in my transplant patients, and I would even consider a 4th vaccine for them if their antibody level is very low. That's a decision, of course, you should make with your doctor and decide with your doctor. But general recommendations are for the 3rd vaccine for transplant patients. Now, this is super important. What if I get COVID-19? So what if you're a chronic kidney disease patient, age greater than 60, or a transplant patient? If you get COVID, you should get monoclonal therapy. So you should call your doctor right away. Now, some of you may be used to calling your primary care doctor, right? Say you have a kidney transplant, you may call your primary care doctor, and he may say, you know, he may say, well, are you feeling okay? And you're like, yeah, I feel great. And he may be like, well, then I would just wait. We think if you have a transplant, then at that point, you should call your transplant doctor because you really need to get the monoclonal antibody. I think in everybody, especially age greater than 60, chronic kidney disease and transplant. And if you're a transplant patient or you have advanced chronic kidney disease and someone comes home and they have COVID and you don't have COVID yet, you still also qualify for the monoclonal antibody. And really importantly, if you're getting sick, don't stay at home. Go get seen in the emergency room or by a doctor because there are therapies for early COVID. And we don't want you to be at home getting sick and then present really late in the course. What is your risk of infection? Your risk of infection depends on personal characteristics, age, chronic kidney disease, transplant status, weight, whether you've been vaccinated, and also the prevalence of COVID in your community, the work school exposure of yourself, and then the work school exposure of family members. So I'll just give you an example. Here's our community and how we've gone through COVID. My daughter Heidi has been tracking this for us. And here are our cases in our county. So when we were here, my wife and I, we had been vaccinated, but I'm not that young anymore. And we were like, we're just going to kind of stay home. We're really wearing masks. We're really going to be really safe. Then we got to here. There were really, really few cases in our community. And we were like, we wanted to get back to living. And so we're like, well, we're going to go out to dinner. We're going to start going out more. Then this happened. So there were many more cases in our community. So then we did more isolation. And so I think it depends on how many cases there are in your community and what your risks of exposure are. As far as masks, I just feel like, to me personally, it's a limited bother to wear a mask. And if it can help someone, I'm all for helping them. Now, I'd like to talk to you about our COVID survey that we did. And so, and this is part of being in the registry. We sent this survey out to our colleagues, our patients, and we're able to get a really good response of 268 individuals who completed the survey. And for time, I'll just say that the patients were, just mostly the average age was in the 40s. More women completed this survey than men, but we got a really nice group of patients who completed it. And what did we find out? So we found out the most important thing, there were 43 individuals with MUC1 disease who had COVID. And out of those, 8 patients or 19% died. Of the patients with the UMOD mutation, 31 had it and 1 died. So we're concerned that the MUC1 patients had a higher rate of bad complications with COVID than patients with the UMOD mutation. So what does this mean to me? In some way, I'm a little more concerned for my MUC1 patients that I want to make sure that they're vaccinated, that they're isolating, and that they're really trying to prevent getting COVID. When we look at our MUC1 patients who passed away, 89% of them had been transplanted. So most of them had been transplanted. Most of them had been vaccinated, but not gotten the booster yet. So, and most of these deaths occurred before the antibody infusion was available. So we think that patients with MUC1 may be at increased risk, but even if they are or not, both groups are still at increased risk compared to the general population. And we recommend vaccination, being safe, creating this zone around you to decrease your risk of exposure, getting the booster. And we're also, if you get COVID, to get monoclonal treatment very soon. And our patients from Cyprus, we know that 2 out of 23 patients with COVID who had MUC1 mutations died there. So MUC1 kidney disease patients may have worse outcomes, but in general, the outcomes we feel our patients are at high risk for COVID and outcomes. We recommend vaccination and receive monoclonal antibodies if you develop COVID-19. I just wanted to highlight that there's a Facebook group that's available, and Kendrah can put this in the notes, and it's really good for interactions. And I know, Drew, we also have there's a foundation, a web page for the patient foundation. If we could show that, I think these are really good ways to interact. And I'd like to say here, just when I drive up to visit our clinic in Mount Erie, North Carolina, this was my view last week. And so I'd like to thank you very much for your attention today. Now let's see here, stop sharing. Okay. And if anyone has questions, of course.
Thanks so much, Tony. We have one question here, and we can maybe briefly answer this one, and then we also have time for questions in a second. But I heard there are some studies indicating, I think you already mentioned monoclonal antibodies, but I'll just read this just in case, as a preventative treatment before exposure to COVID in high exposure areas. Do you have an opinion on this?
I think if you get exposed, so obviously, the treatment won't last forever. And so I don't think just because there's a lot of COVID in the community, though I'm not an expert on this, I haven't heard anything recently. I think they're talking more about post-exposure prophylaxis. So just if you're in a community, you're staying at home and there's a high rate of COVID, you won't qualify for the monoclonal. But if you're working with someone closely, you go to work every day and they're in the desk next to you and they get COVID, then you should get the monoclonal antibody. If you have chronic kidney disease greater than 60 or transplant or any group that's at risk.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. And I think now we'll move to Richard and Katie. And again, thank you, Tony. Like, I always appreciate it's always nice to get back to the baseline and have a larger overview as to where things are. And it always provides such great context, especially for those of us who are joining maybe for the first time, or it's hard sometimes to keep track of all of the scientific elements. So thank you so much.
And I'd like to just say, sorry, one quick thing. If you guys have any questions about the talk I gave or about your mutation or about the study, just please email us at kidney@wakehealth.edu, and we're really happy to answer any questions anytime.
Of course, thanks so much. We're now going to move to a patient voices section, and I'll turn it over to Richard and Katie to manage that. Richard.
Okay. Tony, first of all, you have made a big impact on our family. It's a large family, and Tony has been so accommodating for the last probably 6 years, even meeting with our family at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, his time in the East. We're gonna go through this discussion of being a patient voice, building a community, why advocacy matters from a patient standpoint. Next slide, please. So today's discussion between by myself and Katie Reed will cover the following. First of all, the history of the foundation, the mission and vision and goals of this patient foundation called the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, also found at rarekidney.org. And then what we're going to do going forward, what we've already done, what we're doing moving forward, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. And I'll try to pace my remarks. I'm not going to really go into my story. My story is a long one. I celebrated my 30th anniversary of receiving a transplant on February 16th this year, and have been very involved with the Mayo Clinic for 23 years. And then when Peter Harris referred us to Tony Bleyer, and then we met Anna at the Broad, they've all made a huge difference in my life, my 5 children, and also the 16 cousins that are affected or will be affected, at least half of them, by this MUC1 disease. Today, I'd like to see if, well, you can see we're a large family. This is 5 years ago. Actually, Anna prepared a video for our 100th anniversary, or the 100th birthday of my father. And I'll talk about him in just a minute. First of all, I want to talk about Peter and Cell Bio and his comments today. I've waited and worked and prayed for 30 years that a day like today would happen. With this kind of significant progress, it was pretty hopeless But we always felt hope because we were surrounded by individuals like have presented today. To have the potential of a therapeutic treatment, a pill, within going to the FDA within possibly 2 years, as Peter mentioned, is phenomenal. It's really remarkable. And it's a big reason why I've devoted half of my adult life in pursuing this, pursuing answers. I've always felt like there's hope. I've always felt like there's an answer. We just need to find the right trusted relationships, and let's move this forward and build a very effective, powerful patient community that will support the researchers. We created the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation 4 years ago. It's all about building a community. I have a lot of experience in that. In fact, before I retired, I went to a flexible work schedule 4 years ago. I ran and built 2 large communities, one in my state with 6,000 tech companies, and another one that represented 20,000 tech companies throughout the United States and in North America and Canada. Fortunately, I can use that same skill set, that same to reach out to the patients, especially that are on this call today and beyond. I want to thank the American Association of Kidney Patients and Diana Kleins and Paul Conway, who have been longtime friends. Paul and I have been were on the PKD board a number of years ago. It really will take this kind of effort. I want to underline Peter's emphasis on patients. When we first talked, he talked about how paramount patients are in this whole effort to get this approved and out to bless patients' families. As you can see, when in 2016, there was no compound that we were talking about. We didn't know about the compound. We were having this nice family reunion right in the middle. You can see, maybe you probably can't see, but my wife and myself and our 5 children. Well, that's it. And then these 16 cousins from the 3 other affected MUC1 families. So we have a lot at stake. But frankly, it's not just about us, it's about us helping to bless many, many MUC1 and UMOD patients. Thank you to Anna for your brilliance, for your humanity, for your heart, and just moving this forward. I want to talk about advocacy. In my tech business, we found that advocacy could accelerate progress on hard, complex issues. My statement to myself and my colleagues around the country as we'd work in Washington on tech issues is we need to be in Washington. This applies especially to our rare kidney community. We need to be in Washington making the case for kidney disease funding and legislation. Otherwise, another organization will be there. And sadly, it is a zero-sum game. So we're very fortunate to have a number of partners in the advocacy world. The AAKP's policy committee, led by Paul Conway, the ASN's Health Alliance Initiative, and the Rare Disease Legislation Associates. This gives us ways that we can reach out to our members of Congress and their staffs to make the case of why we should double down and invest and put an emphasis on solving issues like we have, instead of continuing to fund at an extremely high level. I'm glad that it happens with dialysis. Which unfortunately my family knows a lot about, since I've got 3 other siblings that have MUC1. The question I ask and I've asked a number of nephrologists, I've asked the researchers, if you have this disease, again, I thought I had PKD, polycystic kidney disease, for 23 years as I worked with Vicente Torres and Peter Harris at the Mayo Clinic. And then they referred us to Tony, as I mentioned, and Anna, excuse me. And we just, but there were only 600 of us at first. And now there's all of 900 of us and 200 families in the MUC1 and a like number in the UMOD. Well, that's not going to attract many Peter Mundels or create many organizations like Cell Bio or attract many venture firms that are willing to invest. But today, you heard for the first time, there is a company, Cell Bio. It's venture backed. It's starting to be venture backed, and they're extremely optimistic about the much, much larger population. It's not just 2,000 of us, MUC1 and UMOD patients. It's 150,000 or 200,000, and that's just in the United States. So this is a very interesting prospect for funding. It's certainly gotten Peter's attention. It's certainly been proven out in the mouse and organoid model to give us tremendous hope of what we can do as going forward as a combined community with the researchers. But the patient's role is really crucial. And I want to just be very candid. I pursued what we had with the Mayo Clinic for 23 years. And it was a mutant gene. It was a mutant disease. It looked like PKD, but it wasn't PKD. And it took 23 years to finally have Tony and his colleagues publish a very important article about MUC1. It took Peter Harris to see that, and Vicente Torres to refer us to the Broad. So I hope I hope those of you that don't know what your disease is, if your nephrologist can't diagnose it, it's not PKD, you would be open to contacting us at the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, rarekidney.org. Don't wait, or go directly to Tony. He's given his contact information. That's one of my two asks today. In 1991, 30 years ago, I received a life-saving transplant. I'll never forget the gift of life that a family gave me from their 17-year-old daughter who died of a brain aneurysm in upstate New York. For more than 30 years, I have treasured that time. I've had 30 more years than my father, who died at age 43, a young doctor, a young surgeon who left 6 children, and 4 of the 6 of us have MUC1. My grandfather, Andrew, died in his 30s. His father died in his 30s. So this is something that we can solve. There ought to be tremendous hope. I was asked recently in the AAKP's global patient meeting, where presented, it was a privilege to present with Anna there. Why have you invested over half of your adult life trying to find a treatment and cure for ADTKD and MUC1 kidney disease? Well, I'm pretty motivated with 5 children and their 16 cousins. 50%, as I mentioned, will likely have kidney failure. But if it's not us as patients, who is it that's going to pursue this? That's why the patient component of this has been so critical for Tony, as you can hear. It's been so critical for Anna and her team at the Broad. And you just heard again from Peter how crucial. So contact us and come and help us build this community. Next slide, please, as I start to wrap up. Thomas Starzl, as many of you know, is the father of modern transplantation. He was in Colorado, where my young father scrubbed with him in 1959, and then he moved on to the University of Pittsburgh, and brilliant innovator in procedures. I love what he says. History tells us that procedures and therapeutics that were inconceivable yesterday and are barely achievable today are often become routine tomorrow. There is tremendous reason to have hope, but we need to put hope into action. Is my colleague Katie Reed. We've been blessed as a foundation to meet Katie over a year ago. She's phenomenal talent in her profession. In fact, has an ideal skill set to help us move as a highly sought after consultant, move projects forward, keep us on task and accountable. Katie's our Chief Operating Officer. But she's going to talk about giving back. And Katie, why don't I turn it over to you, and then we can open it up for questions at the end.
Thanks, Richard, and thank you, of course, for your kind words. And I'll throw it right back at you. Your vision and what you've established, along with obviously your whole family, is really remarkable. And I and my family and our entire community here owe you a debt of gratitude. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you continue to do, and to your whole family as well. If you can't tell, the excitement is real. The hope is palpable, and we are ready to meet the moment. This recurring theme of hope is embedded in who we are as a Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. You can see our mission and our vision here, and it really centers around this idea of hope. The Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, our mission is to offer hope to families with ADTKD by connecting undiagnosed individuals with testing, providing access to resources, building a community, and using our collective voice to advocate for impactful policies. And our vision, again, hope, we envision a future where all families with ADTKD are hopeful for the future health of their kidneys, where they're diagnosed promptly, supported appropriately, and have access to the most impactful treatments, of course, which we've heard a lot about today. This theme of hope is personal to me, as I know it is to many of you. I think that's just ever so much the case when we have genetic diseases that impact our families. Like you, many of you, I'm a MUC1 patient. I'm 2 years post-transplant, about 2.5 years post-transplant now. I started with the foundation when I was just over a year post-transplant. And my twin sister, who's on this call, is 16 years post-transplant. We are adopted, and the disease runs in our birth mother's family. Unfortunately, by the time we found out her identity, both she and our brother had passed away from this disease on dialysis at age 50 and 25, respectively. So it's really personal to me. And while it may be too late for me and my sister and the generations that came before us, it's not too late for the ones that follow. And so this is the ones that follow for us. This is my son. This is Ryan. He's age 5. He loves rockets, airplanes, Star Wars, and vanilla milkshakes that he's drinking in this picture here. He's a big brother to Ellie, who's age 1. She was adopted last year, so she does not have MUC1, but Ryan does have a 50% chance, obviously, of having this disease. And so he's my motivation. And like you, like me, I'm sure you don't want this for your children, for your grandchildren, for your sisters, your brothers, your nieces, your nephews, your extended family, your community, our community. And so this is the place. This is the place that you can come to channel that energy, to channel the worry, the frustration, the years of anxiety that maybe, like me, you felt waiting for kidney failure to hit you. This is the place to channel all of that and turn it into hope. This is exactly what our KDF stands for, as you can see in our mission and our vision. And we hope that you will join us to build this hope for our community. Again, I want to thank you, Richard. I want to thank you, Drew. I want to thank the entire Nelson family for your leadership here. But while the Nelson family started this foundation, it belongs to all of us. And so today I'll share a bit about what we've been doing, where we're going, and of course, we will ask you to join our cause. So Drew and Richard, of course, please feel free to chime in as I go through this. You've been obviously instrumental to where we've been and will continue to be instrumental to where we go forward. But we're building something big here and we want everybody to join this process with us. So the RKDF, we function as a patient voice for research while aiming to raise awareness. A little bit of history, as Richard explained, founded several years ago by the Nelson family, the large Nelson family, after years and years of, pursuing what this was by Richard and his siblings. And then it's moved forward since then. In about a year ago, the Patient Engagement Working Group was established as part of this broader ADTKD research coalition, and we've been growing ever since. So last year, October of 2020, right about a year ago, we had a kickoff patient family webinar. I say we, I actually wasn't part of the foundation at that time, but I joined that webinar and was sucked in with the energy and enthusiasm of the Nelson family. And I hope we'll be able to do the same for some of you today and get you to join us as well. From there, we formed a small volunteer group, again, led by the Nelson family, plus me. I now consider myself part of the Nelson family since this past year, but we organized the effort to move this forward. Fast forward to the summer and fall of this year, we've been doing a lot of the things that we set out to do in terms of raising awareness and building community and advocating. Again, we held that patient family webinar. Richard, as he mentioned, presented at the AAKP and held several discussions, I think 7 discussions with members on Capitol Hill. So continuing to move the work forward. That brings us to today with our 2nd annual summit. And of course, then we move forward into 2022. And how do we aggressively move forward, bringing in patients, bringing in family members, and expanding our reach and support our colleagues in Wake Forest and the Broad, Sale Bio, and everywhere else to make sure that we are bringing patients in and that we are getting patients to them. So these are our priorities as a foundation. We laid this out over this past year along with our mission and vision, and it's really threefold. First is to increase awareness. We want to make sure that we're building awareness about ADTKD. Obviously, we know the numbers that have been diagnosed are nowhere near, as we've discussed and heard many times today, the numbers that likely have this family of diseases. And so we want to think about awareness building and being an awareness builder among patients with the nephrology and medical community, and of course, in the broader kidney community. We want to build community amongst all of us as patients and family members, be the go-to resource for families for information, support, and fellowship. We often talk about helping patients, bringing them to, through, and out of testing, and keeping them as a part of our family as we move forward. And then finally, advocating effectively and being the patient voice in research and policy. We've heard over and over today how critical that's going to be as we move forward and as we bring potentially therapies to trials. And so that is our immediate goal, is to help, using our levers of awareness and community building and advocacy to increase the patient base for FDA clinical trials that may be forthcoming. But more importantly than that, we are a patient organization. We care about patients. We want to find the 150,000, 200,000, whatever may be patients that aren't diagnosed yet, get them through so that they know when therapies may become available. And so this is what we've been working on over the course of this past year, working on applying for grant funding. Will always be something that we will continue to do. We've been working very hard at building out our virtual presence. And so you'll see on every slide here, we promote rarekidney.org. That is our website. We just launched it within about a month or 6 weeks ago. We'd encourage you to go check it out. And we'll continue to build upon that over the upcoming months. But this is our home base, if you will. Obviously, a lot more to do, a lot more to think about with social media and how to most effectively use our website and other mechanisms, but we're really excited about that launch. We've been working on developing patient and family outreach strategies, things like we've talked about with the AAKP presentation, with the summit itself, with roundtables. Those are things that fall under this branch. And then developing our advocacy platform in partnership with everyone else that you've heard from today. Obviously, the work doesn't start there. We've just started mobilizing, and we need to move forward with lots of energy and with lots of support from you all. So as we look ahead to 2022, again, 3 key priorities: increasing awareness, building community, and advocating for our community. The strategies that we are focusing on, and I'll talk a little more about this one. First is developing a patient and family steering committee for a highly invested group of volunteers. Over the course of the past several months, we've had many names that I actually see on today's call, which is very exciting, reach out to us and wanting to get involved. And so we recognize that one of the things we need to do as a very small team of volunteers here is figure out how to best effectively and efficiently organize ourselves to be able to take advantage of the tremendous talent that sits around this virtual table right now. And again, I've recognized several names that are here, and we're really excited that you've already reached out to us, and we'll encourage more of you to do the same. So we want to organize a steering committee. Next, we want to investigate and continue to expand our partnerships. Richard has really been leading this, doing a tremendous job with this. We have a lot of opportunity, especially as we bring more people into the fold, to continue to expand those partnerships, whether they're at the national or local level or even globally. And that leads into our next priority for this upcoming year, which is to leverage opportunities to broaden our global reach. This really has come to us through some patients that have reached out to us from across the world that are interested in making sure that that their communities are represented here. And we're really looking forward to doing that and finding ways to do that in 2022. And then finally, like I said, this will always be on here, identify funding opportunities to do this important work. And so, we'll continue to do that. We are a 501c3. We are a fully volunteer team, but we do want to see if we can find funding to push this work forward aggressively. As I mentioned, the steering committee, none of this is set in stone. Please don't take it as such, but these are some ideas that are mulling around in our head. We've heard how critical it is to have patient voice and have diverse patient voice. And so we know that the few of us that have been involved so far, we're just the beginning, we're just the tip, and that there's a lot more folks, you all included, that we need to bring into this conversation to be a representative voice for research and development. And so our goal is to organize this and launch hopefully in Q1 of 2022 and figure out a way to channel again all the talent and enthusiasm that's coming to us. We're envisioning potentially something like this with different groups focusing on advocacy and partnerships, awareness building, engagement and community building, and governance and planning support. Many others, I'm sure. This is a start point for 2022. We recognize it will continue to evolve, especially as we move further and into the out years. But if you look at this and you see something that speaks to you, some kind of expertise that you bring to the table, something that you're really interested in, something that your family members might be interested in, please reach out to us, get involved. We need folks that want to really volunteer staff a lot of this work. So please join us in our mission. Help us move forward with hope as our key goal here. The biggest thing everyone can do, if you are a patient, if you are a family member, is to share your story. Who's within your circle of influence that you can talk to? Your extended family members, as we've talked about, some that may be willing to jump into this conversation now that a potential therapy may be, real within the near future. So again, your extended family members, but where else can you find people? If you're on dialysis or in a dialysis center, who can you speak to? Your nephrologist, their community. Think about sharing your story and how we can start to find these folks that are undiagnosed and bring them into this process. While you're doing that, we'll ask that you share our work. The more we can get our name out there, the more we can become a place that folks can come in and we can help channel them to the right places, get them the right resources. So don't be shy, share our work. We absolutely encourage you to do that. And finally, as I've said, share your expertise. We really need to bring more people in to move this forward aggressively. I wouldn't be a great advocate here if I didn't mention immediate fundraising opportunities for the RKDF. If you're like me and you use Amazon, I use it all the time for those small kiddos that I mentioned before. A small piece of all the diapers I buy go directly to RKDF. Through Amazon Smile. So, please, if you use Amazon, set up your charity selection to Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. You should be able to find it on there. If you have troubles, by all means, reach out, rarekidney.org. You'll see a contact form, and we'll share our emails later at the end of this presentation. But that contact form goes directly to me. And so I will certainly reach out and help you figure out how to do that. And of course, you can donate directly through rarekidney.org. There's a donate button on there. It's really straightforward and easy. As I mentioned before, we're a 501c3 public charity. Federal tax ID is available, so tax deductions. And so, again, please, again, don't be shy in reaching out about expertise you want to bring. Don't be shy about thinking about fundraising as well. Some next steps. I'll echo what Dr. Bleyer said before about joining the ADTKD research Facebook group. There's a long title, but if you take a screen grab of this or wait for the presentation slides to come back out, you can find this if you are in Facebook. It's a great community of ADTKD, MUC1, and UMOD patients. I'm on that group, and it's been really helpful. And so, again, thanks to Michael Schaefer, who set that up, and for Dr. Bleyer for promoting that as well. If you can complete the volunteer opportunity form, we'll put a link in the chat before this presentation is over. You can let us know within that form exactly what you're interested in, or if you don't know what you're interested in, but you're just generally interested in supporting the efforts here, you can complete that form, or you can reach out to us directly. Again, there's a contact form on our website, rarekidney.org, that you can fill out. Again, that contact form goes directly to me, and I'll be happy to take it that way. You can also find our emails here, pretty straightforward and simple, katie@rarekidney.org and richard@rarekidney.org. That is all I have. Richard, Drew, I'd like to pass the ball over to you if there's anything that you'd like to share as well.
No, as you can see, it's remarkable for us to have someone like Katie come and join and suddenly really help us level up in a serious way. And we're so grateful for Katie and also, of course, to Richard for decades and decades of work here. That context and experience helps a ton. And then Katie's an executor, and so, like she says, we need more Katies to join this cause. Yeah, thanks so much. So this last kind of segment that we have here, I think can be pretty open-ended. We have kind of time for Q&A and then just like what are next steps, but there's nothing really formal there, and we really want to hear from folks and have a discussion. And so there are a few questions that we can talk to initially. And then we can go ahead and open it up for, what's going to help you the most? What's going to help your family the most? What do you feel like is, here you've listened to talks the last few days here and certainly today. What's going to have the greatest impact? And maybe what didn't we cover that we should be covering? Last year, we ended this summit with actually setting up some working groups. And out of those working groups, and in fact, our foundation was our foundation was kind of charged with leading the patient advocacy working group. And again, the nice thing is, since we've become more organized, I'm not sure we necessarily need another set of working groups, but we certainly do need suggestions and action items. And we need to hear from folks as to what are the concerns that are brewing in the back of your mind that if we can't address now, what can we and the clinicians, and now we have industry professionals like Peter, how can we address these across the board over the next few months and the next few years so that we can build something that is sustainable and scalable, as we all think this is an underdiagnosed group of diseases, right? We want to grow this community. And certainly as we are very hopeful for treatment as well. So so I wanted to plant that seed, and we can even promote everybody or anybody who wants to contribute, raise your hand, and we'll promote you to video as well. And so we can have a very free flowing and sort of open conversation for a few minutes. And this doesn't need to go on for a really long time, and please don't feel any obligation, but we wanted to at least carve out time for folks to contribute and feel like you're part of the conversation. So let's first address a couple of the questions in the Q&A. And first, there was a question in the chat and then also in the Q&A about the recording. We are recording this, and like last year, we will put it out on YouTube in the next couple days. Everything will be there. Since it's such a long recording, we tried to build in chapters so you can kind of skip to or encourage your family members to skip to the talk or talks that you're interested in reviewing. We encourage you to share that, please, out with your family members, your nephrologist, others who need to have more awareness about what's currently happening in this. Someone also asked about the financial situation of the foundation. As Katie said, you're not a smart 501c3 if you're not asking people to donate. Largely, again, we've started this on an entirely volunteer basis. We threw in a little bit of money just to get kind of some of the basic costs covered, and then kind of covered our own travel and other costs the last few years. But what we're really hoping to do, as Katie said, like how do we fuel that growth? Well, we'd love to hire a full-time staffer to be working on this all the time, right? We don't want it to become really overhead, intensive, but we'd love to put money behind just awareness campaigns and a lot of these things that Katie was talking about. So we haven't raised a lot of money. That's been sort of an intentional choice and also just a factor of being relatively small. But we're now reaching a point where we really want to broadcast this message. So we welcome your ideas, we'd welcome your cash, and we welcome your time. We want one of the three at least, whichever one you have to give. So happy to have further discussions there as well. Tony, there was a question I think for you. What is your opinion of the new Pfizer? Back to your conversation about COVID. What's your opinion of the new Pfizer product under review for early treatment of COVID, similar to Tamiflu?
Yeah, I'm really excited. So what can I say? I'm pro pharma. Pharma is going to end up solving our problem with ADTKD. I think this pill, it could be a real game changer. So I'm super excited about it.
Great. Thank you. And as you can see, we also have that volunteer form that Katie shared. But now I just want to open this up, and we can go through and anybody who'd like to ask sort of live questions, or again, this is not a command performance by any means, but we'd love to hear from patients and family members and caregivers and researchers who are still on with us as to what you see as the next steps and how we can facilitate that conversation. We have one from Julia here. I'd like to know what efforts are underway to work with academic scientists to facilitate research efforts. I am a preclinical research scientist that could help run studies in mice with a little money to generate the data. Well, the good news is you're tapping into a global research community that is very well honed. And I've been lucky enough to sit in on a couple of their meetings where, certainly pre-COVID, where they've all gotten together from all over the world to collaborate. I don't know if Anna's still on, but Tony, I don't know if you want to speak to that, like the current working group of academics and researchers from all over the world that are working on this, and maybe how someone could get plugged into that.
So I'll just take a quick stab at it. So I think that, there are several groups working on mouse models. Making these mouse models was incredibly difficult for the MUC1 mouse, which the Broad Institute and Dr. Greca get credit for that. And then there's also the UMOD, and there are a number of mouse models for the mutant UMOD mouse. And so I think the best thing would be to get in touch with researchers who are already working in this area, like Dr. Greco or Luca Rampoldi. We work very closely with him and other, there are a number of other researchers, but those are the first two that come to mind about these preclinical studies.
And I'm just happy to add that we always welcome interest and help. And so if you go to search for me, you will find my email address very easily if you Google my name. And I would welcome hearing from you and finding ways that we could work together. So we always welcome any help on our research.
Great, thanks so much. Well, we don't have a lot of people jumping in to make comments, which is fine. We're now at 3 hours, so this has been very much an endurance play. And I say this morning here in Salt Lake City, but wherever you might be, we, like I was saying, compared to last year, we have much more of a game plan, because we have, out of the working groups that came last year, we now had a whole presentation yesterday on biomarkers. And the registry working group, I mean, the registry is in very good hands, right, at Wake Forest and collaborating with folks around the world. And of course, patient advocacy, we now have a much more clear roadmap of where at least the Patient Foundation is heading in the future. What to look for in the coming months. We will continue. Tony has on a regular basis webinars to pull other family members into on the latest research and how that impacts patients. So be sure to keep an eye out for those. They also record those, but those are incredibly valuable. We are having quarterly foundation-driven patient meetings as well. And so we want to loop you into those, and that's where we'll do a lot of our organizing. Please do reach out to Katie directly via rarekidney.org, and we'll loop you into those and match your skill set with specific needs. And other than that, I think we can largely wind up. But there is
Great job, Drew.
Well, there's one final question, and this is a good one for you. I know you've gotten this before, Tony, but everyone's always interested, and just like Katie showed her 5-year-old. There's a question: what are your suggestions on testing for our children? What is the best timing there? That's always a concern for folks.
So I think, really, I'm just very happy to hopefully, I want to end this on such an optimistic note. So, I was discussing this with someone yesterday, and I was thinking back, if we look at our families, and so for example, my cousins, they had polycystic kidney disease. And it's very similar to what Richard has to say. So the grandmother she never even made it to dialysis. She passed away before it was available. And then my uncle, George, was a great guy, was an engineer, and he ended up on dialysis, and he was doing CAPD, which is peritoneal dialysis during the day. And he lived in Boston, and he would drive in and do exchanges in his truck. I mean, it was just really sad. He never made it to the transplant list. And so that was like 20 years later or 30 years later. And so then the next generation was my cousins. And when they needed to, when they reached kidney failure, we were really like, oh gosh, it's going to just be like our uncle. But they were able to get transplanted very quickly, and they didn't go on dialysis. And so, but they still have to deal with the immunosuppressant. So this is all generation, right? And so when we look at the children now, the next generation, we have 20, 30 years, not for everybody, but and so in 20, 30 years, I mean, it's just going to be a game changer. So what do we have? Well, we've already seen that Dr. Montgomery, who actually has a heart transplant, he's a surgeon who's from Hopkins. He just did a transplant where they took a pig kidney and they had removed some of the antigens. Now, this was just very preliminary, but he showed there was no acute rejection in this for humans. And this is a huge step. We have CRISPR techniques that Dr. Greco is working on. CRISPR involves gene editing, for which these diseases I think are really optimal for. Dr. Kamak's lab several years ago showed the potential of CRISPR in MUC1 kidney disease. And then we have all of these things, right, that are coming about right now. So we have many, many different hopes. And I think in 10 to 15 years, we're really gonna, things are not gonna be theoretical. And it's not based on just one path, right? We wanna have a lot of paths. So we have a lot of paths to success. And of course, the medication, we're just like super excited about. So, so then this brings up about testing, right? And so I don't think, one thing that I really don't like about testing children is I'm always worried they're going to be treated differently. And so, for example, if you test a 12-year-old and he has, kidney disease, and then you all go out to dinner and everybody orders a steak and they say, Johnny, you better just have vegetables, right? So where there's no evidence that that would be helpful to him, right? So we don't have anything, especially for less than 18, that we would recommend for children with the MUC1 mutation that we would not recommend for any child in general. Eat healthy, exercise, don't smoke, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't recommend testing for children with MUC1 kidney disease. Now for UMOD is a little different because young people can develop gout. And so then I divide it into two groups. And so one group is like, if your family has somewhat milder disease, no one developed gout during childhood, then I think those kids can wait till they're 18 to be tested. Then there's the other group though, you have a more of a family history of gout in childhood, you're an athlete, say you're on the football team and you don't want to miss the championship. So those kids, we might want to test because we might want to get them started on allopurinol to prevent them from getting gout later, before a big event. So I think everybody needs to lead a heart healthy life and to concentrate on good health. And we have a webinar that's actually for testing that we can share with you. And we want anyone who gets testing to look at the webinar before they're tested. So for children, we're not red hot. Now, if there's an elevated creatinine, we would consider it. But I'm really for just letting these kids lead and just enjoy the heck out of being children. And we can worry about this stuff later. As for adults, that's another issue. There are a lot of adults out there who also are wondering about getting tested, especially young adults. And so my feeling about that is, I think it's good to get tested. Eventually, you'll end up getting a creatinine measured. You may go to the hospital for your appendix and they say, oh, your creatinine is elevated, or you may find out in some roundabout way. So I think it's beneficial to get tested. We've done, as you can tell, we've done a lot of work on this. Primarily, as I showed you, we've had 300 or 400 patients that we've diagnosed, and I personally called back everybody with the results, and I can tell you, so it's difficult, So we've looked back at the patients who did not know they had kidney disease, right? And so 50% of them are going to have really good news that they don't have the disease. 50% will not get the good news. We looked at the 50% who didn't get the good news, and 99% of them were happy that they got tested. And all of them were more happy than not happy that they were tested. So then once you're tested, then you can, the cause of why your creatinine may be elevated. You can follow your blood pressure more closely. And we have a window now to get testing, and we can get testing for anyone for free. I'm hoping that'll continue forever, but of course I can never say for sure. It looks like we'll be able to do it. But we're happy to do the testing, and we also have the availability and the resources to counsel you before and after. So for children, I think I would hold off unless your creatinine is elevated. I really would not be tempted in MUC1 kidney disease to even check the creatinine before 18. But we're always interested to discuss on an individual basis with everybody. And one other thing, And children, whoever, even if the parents want the kids tested, no matter the age, the children have to give us some input that they want to be tested.
All right,
Can I
thank you.
just add a small comment to that? You know, I spend most of my time doing research, but I run a specialty clinic at the Brigham where I see patients with genetic kidney diseases of all kinds. And so, you know, Tony is an incredible leader in this space and has tremendous experience. I think that we are, you know, very lucky to have such a kind of a center and an organized team with real expertise in these disease areas, because I see patients from all over the world, and there's a lot of confusion and, you know, difficulty in sort of people understanding their disease. I think that understanding comes from the genetic diagnosis. And I would say that for adults, especially with the promise of a therapy, now is the time to get tested, because that will allow you to ultimately consider yourselves or family members eligible for upcoming clinical trials, participate in natural history studies, you know, biomarker studies. And so I would urge certainly adults who can, you know, make their own decisions about their health, that it's of great benefit to have the genetic diagnosis so that you can help your community and yourselves and your families, you know, with this information. So I would greatly endorse the idea of being connected to Tony and his team, who are real experts in this. And I've seen many of my own patients benefit greatly from taking this approach of knowing rather than not knowing about the underlying diagnosis. So I heavily endorse doing that. And Tony's comments for children are very well taken, and I agree with that perspective as well, that there's time and one can wait for the kids, but for the adults amongst us, I think that would be very important. So, and we're very lucky again that Tony and his team, Kendrah is an not unsung hero, but definitely a hero, and hopefully very highly sung hero of this effort. She really makes a lot of things work beautifully and a great partner in our efforts. So Kendrah, thank you for everything you do. And yeah, a tremendous day, since I have the mic, a tremendous day today. And just so inspiring to see all of you rallying behind this idea that we might have new treatments marching toward the clinic. Really wonderful and inspiring to see the work that's been going on here with Katie Reed, amazing work, Richard Nelson, and Drew Ludlow. Thank you so much for inviting us and organizing this incredible 2 days. Thank you so much from me and my team.
Oh, well, you're kind. And it's very fitting that Dr. Greca and Dr. Bleyer have the last word here because, again, we owe so much to both of you and and your team. So thank you so much. I think we'll wrap these 5 hours now over 2 days, and we'll certainly reconvene in the future and next year and in between. So thanks so much for everyone's contribution, and we'll see you all hopefully very soon.